Chapter 1368. The kings of hell panicked as fear weighed down on their hearts. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore and gave up on attacking, shouting, "Dizang of Goguryeo, I surrender. I will turn back from the sea of bitterness, please let me go." "Yes, I surrender as well." Several kings of hell surrendered one after another. Although they were usually high and mighty, they were not as powerful as they had imagined. Seeing this, King Yama was both embarrassed and angry. He roared in a low voice, "Are you still king of hell? You're actually begging for mercy. Where's your status? Where's your courage? If you lose your life, what's the value of your status and courage?" A king of hell resentfully retorted. King Yama was speechless. He had no way of stopping others, but he could choose to stand. Even if he died, he would still die standing. After all, he was the leader of the 10 kings of hell. There was a big difference between him and the other kings of hell. He stood proudly and stared straight at Dizang of Goguryeo, saying, "If you want to take everything from me, you have to step over my corpse." Dizang of Goguryeo did not answer him. Instead, he lightly flew towards him. He stretched out his hand and a golden light blossomed from his fingertips. The light was so bright that it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. Everyone looked at the golden light and the shock and fear in their hearts increased. They couldn't help but lower their heads. So. Golden light suddenly appeared and flew out, dyeing the sky golden. Puff puff puff. Rays of golden light entered their bodies and blood splattered everywhere. A few figures shook violently as their eyes were filled with disbelief. "Dizang of Goguryeo, you," one by one, weak voices sounded out and then stopped abruptly. Then, the sound of people falling to the ground rang out one after another. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at all of this indifferently and said calmly, "The sea of bitterness is boundless, not everyone can turn back. Put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. This is just your wishful thinking." The Yama king stared at the fallen Yama kings around him. The shock in his heart was truly unimaginable. If it wasn't for the last bit of courage supporting him, he would have already collapsed to the ground. Why did you kill them?" The king Yenluo stammered as he finally asked the question in his heart. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at him deeply and said, "You have enslaved the ghost realm for so many years, and now you want to lay down your butcher's knife? Not only will I not agree to it, but the living beings of the ghost world will also never agree to it." The king of hell felt a chill in his heart as he impatiently asked, "Didn't you say that the sea of bitterness is boundless and that repentance is the shore?" "You are not qualified." Dizang of Goguryeo's expression did not change, and his hand shone with a bright golden light again. The Yama king instantly felt the threat of death. His expression drastically changed as he spoke, "You even want to kill me? Are you any different from them?" Dizang of Goguryeo asked. The Yama king was speechless. He was truly no different from the other Yama kings. In fact, his deeds far surpassed theirs. Therefore, he did not have any special privileges. Suddenly, his gaze turned and saw Song Jiangwang, who was safe and sound. His heart trembled as he pointed at him and asked, "Then what about Song Jiangwang?" Dizang of Goguryeo glanced at Song Jiangwang from the corner of his eye. Song Jiangwang's expression changed drastically as he cursed the king of hell in his heart. He was about to die, yet he still didn't stop and wanted to drag him down. He hurriedly wanted to explain and separate himself from the Dizang of Goguryeo. However, he heard Dizang of Goguryeo faintly say, "He is no different from you. It's just that he has a little cleverness, so he doesn't have to die for the time being." "Why?" The king of hell was furious. "This is not fair. Didn't you say that all living things are equal?" "Of course it's fair." Dizang of Goguryeo retorted, "His sins are almost the same as yours, but he doesn't believe in my ideals. Therefore, I will let him witness my success and let him know that he is wrong. In the future, he will follow in your footsteps and tell you that he is wrong. Moreover, he is very wrong." "What?" Song Jiangwang turned pale with fright as he screamed. He had always thought that he was lucky enough to escape this calamity, but he didn't expect that his thinking was too beautiful. His little thoughts didn't escape the eyes of Dizang of Goguryeo at all. In other words, Dizang of Goguryeo didn't care about his little thoughts at all. Because, he already had a plan. When the king of hell heard this, he revealed a smile and looked at Song Jiangwang mockingly, as if saying, "You betrayed us, but you still have to die. This is your fate." Song Jiangwang's expression became extremely ugly. The sharp sword hanging above his head still didn't disappear. Once Dizang of Goguryeo succeeded in transforming the ghost realm, it would be the time of his death. "Song Jiangwang, I'll wait for you." The king of hell smiled mockingly at Song Jiangwang, then looked at the king of hell and said resolutely, "You don't need to do anything." Boom! As soon as his voice fell, the king of hell exploded, turning into strands of yin qi as his soul scattered. Of the 10 kings of hell, only Song Jiangwang was left. Song Jiangwang stood in place in a daze, as if he could also smell the scent of death. He looked at the strands of yin qi in a daze. "No, I can't give up just like this. I have to survive." Dizang of Goguryeo vowed that when he succeeds, it will be the time of my death. If he never succeeds, then I won't die. Song Jiangwang had a flash of inspiration and immediately found a flaw, regaining his vitality. Dizang of Goguryeo's gaze turned and walked towards the Azura, saying, "Azura, your intelligence has been awakened. I will convert you." "Roar," the Azura roared, expressing his anger. Dizang of Goguryeo acted as if he didn't see it and said, "In the future, you will thank me." With that, a golden light flashed and the endless Kasaya descended from the sky, wrapping around the Azura. With a flash of golden light, the Azura disappeared. The endless Kasaya flew back to Dizang of Goguryeo. Wearing the Kasaya, it shone with a golden light, making people unable to look at it directly. Dizang of Goguryeo ignored the Azura and faced Li Xiaotian, saying, "Now, you will witness my success." Li Xiaotian stubbornly raised his head. His tears had long since dried up as he stared straight at Dizang of Goguryeo. His unyielding attitude was obvious. Dizang of Goguryeo didn't care. With a wave of his hand, Li Xiaotian flew up lightly and entered the teleportation array with him. Song Jiangwang seemed to have awoken from a dream and quickly chased after them. With a flash of light, the teleportation array opened and the three disappeared. Tang Jing fell as if there was no end. After an unknown period of time, there was finally a glimmer of light in front of him. Splash! Water splashed everywhere as he fell into the water. He suddenly held his breath and popped his head out of the water. "Where is this?" He hurriedly looked around. There was no end, it was all water. He didn't know where the end was. It seemed to be bigger than the sea he had seen before. "Maybe I can see the whole picture if I fly up to the sky." He had an idea. He urged his mana and tried to fly up. Splash! A series of water splashed everywhere, but he couldn't fly up. It used to be an easy task, but now it was impossible. What was going on? He looked around blankly. His hands flapped in the water. There seemed to be a force of attraction in the water, firmly binding him, making him unable to break out of the water. He couldn't help but think of the river Styx. Nothing in the river Styx could float. It was full of strangeness just like the water. Obviously, this wasn't the river Styx. Because, he could float. He forced his brain to calm down and carefully analyzed his situation. Dizang of Goguryeo made a crack in the ground, and then he fell through the crack. This is the depths of the ghost realm? The ghost realm doesn't have magma like the human world, but it's such a desert. He didn't know that this was the sea of bitterness that Dizang of Goguryeo mentioned. Dizang of Goguryeo had been in the 18 layers of hell for countless years. The 18 layers of hell was the deepest place in the ghost realm, and it was also the closest to the earth's core. When Dizang of Goguryeo mastered his technique, he sensed that there was such a boundless ocean in the depths of the earth's core. The ocean was as big as the ghost realm. Dizang of Goguryeo named this ocean as the Sea of Bitterness. Moreover, he used his supreme magical power to support the Sea of Bitterness and set up layers of restrictions. Other than him, no one could reach the sea of bitterness. In addition, once someone was trapped in the sea of bitterness, they would wander in this boundless sea of bitterness, alone and without anyone to rely on, as if they were abandoned by the world. The only way to leave the sea of bitterness was to turn back. This turning back was not just to twist one's neck and look back, but it had a deeper meaning. The sea of misery was augmented by the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's divine ability. Only by comprehending the profound meaning augmented by the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva and comprehending its essence could one truly turn back. Only then would one be able to break through the restriction and return to the surface. Tang Zheng still didn't know all this. After analyzing it, he still couldn't figure it out, so he simply swam in the sea of bitterness. He didn't believe that this sea of bitterness had no end. As long as he found the end, he might be able to find a way to leave this place. At the same time, he had a lot of complaints about Dizang of Goguryeo in his heart. What was the purpose of trapping him here and falling to the ground? What would he do to Li Xiaotian? He shouldn't hurt Li Xiaotian. Tang Zheng pondered nervously, I must leave here as soon as possible and save her. As he swam, he urged his power, trying to break free from the restraint of the seawater. His power was running freely, but he still couldn't get out of the seawater. This made him very upset, but he also understood that this sea of bitterness was definitely not as simple as he thought. Swim, swim, swim without knowing where the end was. He swam tirelessly as if he wanted to keep swimming until he died. Tang Zheng was already numb. He didn't remember how long he had swam, but he still couldn't see the shore. He stopped dispiritedly, wanting to cry but having no tears. This must be a spell. As long as I break this spell, I might be able to escape. Tang Zheng thought to himself, but he didn't give up. It was easy to say, but easier said than done. He held his head and racked his brains, but only managed to figure out a little. This sea of bitterness probably had no end, which meant that there was no shore. It was just like what Dizang of Goguryeo said, the sea of bitterness had no end. The sea of bitterness has no end? His heart trembled, and his eyes lit up a little. He remembered that Dizang of Goguryeo had been rambling on about how the sea of bitterness had no end, and turning back was the shore. Could this be the sea of bitterness? He thought for a while and was sure that his guess was probably not far from the truth. The sea of bitterness has no end, and turning back was the shore. He suddenly turned his head back. Where was the shore? It was still the endless sea. He slowly turned his head again, but it was still the boundless sea. Where is the shore? Where is the shore? Turning back was the shore. It's all a lie. He used all his strength and shouted hysterically. Chapter 1369. Anger, helplessness, hesitation, pain. All kinds of emotions tormented Tang Zheng. Fortunately, his nerves were strong enough. Otherwise, in this desolate place, he would have broken down. He had someone he cared about in his heart, so naturally, he would not break down so easily. He had to find a way to leave this damned place. He had already tried many methods, but none of them worked. The sea of bitterness is boundless, turn back to the shore. He kept repeating this sentence, certain that the mystery was in this sentence. But how to turn back was a big problem. Could the answer be in the Ksitigarbha Sutra? He had an idea, and his mouth naturally began to recite the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Sanskrit after Sanskrit words came out of his mouth. The golden light emitted by the Sanskrit words dyed the sea of bitterness golden. The golden light rippled, as if he was in a golden world. The Ksitigarbha Sutra was recited over and over again. More and more Sanskrit words appeared, falling into the sea and disappearing. He was very familiar with the Ksitigarbha Sutra. As the saying goes, reading 100 times will reveal its meaning. When he recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra over and over again, he was more and more convinced that the Ksitigarbha Sutra was the key to leaving the sea of bitterness. He recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra tirelessly. More and more Sanskrit words flew out of his mouth, surrounding his entire body. After a while, he became a golden man, completely surrounded by Sanskrit words, shining with golden light. He simply closed his eyes, but he saw the golden light penetrate his skin bit by bit, drilling into his body. His body only had one main meridian, the 8 main meridians were completely destroyed. His body structure was very different from ordinary people. The golden light penetrated his skin, muscles, and bones, and merged into the only main meridian left. After a while, the main meridian was also dyed in gold. Boom! Suddenly, the energy in the meridian became violent. Back then, he absorbed the energy of the 9 souls of the golden crow. Although with Li Xiaotian's pure yin energy, he succeeded in harmonizing the pure yang energy. But this energy was not completely refined, it was only temporarily stored in the body. When the golden light rushed in, it clashed with the energy, and both sides became restless. The 2 energies clashed, both trying to suppress the other. Tang Zheng let out a low roar of pain. Of course, he wouldn't just stand by and watch them run amok. He immediately urged his true qi and aggressively rushed over. The 3 energies clashed and entangled with each other, and the situation immediately changed dramatically. The true energy and the golden crow energy did not repel each other. Instead, they cooperated with each other. The golden crow energy threw away its armor and fled in all directions. The 2 energies chased after each other, refining the golden crow's energy. The golden crow's energy fled even faster, but the meridians were only so big. In the end, the golden crow's energy could not escape. The refined golden crow energy turned into 2 types of energy. One was true energy, and the other was golden energy. This golden energy was born from the Ksitigarbha Sutra. It was a type of Buddhist energy. As it increased, the golden light on Tang Zheng's body became more and more intense. Tang Zheng's cultivation had already reached the 9th stage of the divine transformation realm. He was only 1 step away from the great realization realm. As the true energy in his body increased, there were signs of him breaking through this threshold. He was extremely happy. This was really a blessing in disguise. Although he was trapped in the sea of suffering, if his cultivation improved, there was no doubt that he would have a greater chance of escaping this sea of suffering. However, his joy did not last long. This was because when the true energy increased and seemed to be about to break through the limit, the golden energy suddenly exploded. It actually suppressed the true energy, causing it to be unable to grow any further. On the contrary, the golden energy seemed to have gone crazy as it rapidly grew. In an instant, Tang Zheng's internal organs and 8 extraordinary meridians were completely occupied by the golden energy. The true energy and the golden crow's energy were all pushed to a corner. Tang Zheng was dumbfounded. What was going on? Why was the golden energy so strong? He hurriedly urged his energy, and the ancient clear heaven scroll quickly began to circulate. At the same time, the heavenly book also began to circulate quietly. The ancient clear heaven scroll was the general outline of the heavenly book. When the ancient clear heaven scroll was completed, the heavenly book would naturally circulate in succession. The heavenly book was a supreme technique that allowed one to peek into the heavenly Tao and become a heavenly emperor. It was a technique that only the heavenly emperors of each generation could cultivate. Its power could be imagined. Suddenly, the true energy seemed to have changed, and it actually stopped the trend of being defeated. With the circulation of the heavenly book, the power of the true energy increased greatly. It actually counterattacked and forced the golden energy to stop. The 2 completely different energies went from cooperating to confronting each other. All of these changes were too mysterious. Tang Zheng was dazzled. For a moment, he could not guess the profound meaning of this change or what it meant. However, the true energy had stopped the trend of being defeated, which made him very relieved. After all, this was the result of his countless years of cultivation. Of course, he did not want to be defeated by the golden energy. He did not know that these 2 completely different energies were of different attributes. The true energy belonged to the heavenly way, which was abbreviated as Tao energy. The other was the power of Buddhism, which was abbreviated as Buddhist energy. The Buddhist energy and the Tao energy seemed to directly regard each other as opponents. They were confronting each other and did not give in at all. They both wanted to defeat each other. This was also because Tang Zheng was big enough and did not investigate the reason. If the Dizang of Goguryeo saw this scene, he would definitely investigate deeply. It turned out that Tao and Buddhism were incompatible. When the Tao energy and the Buddhist energy collided, they both refined the Golden Crow's energy and replenished themselves. Tang Zheng's body became the battlefield. For a moment, his mind was completely immersed, as if he had forgotten that he was in a sea of suffering. In the world of spirits and souls, earth-shaking changes were happening rapidly. When the Dizang of Goguryeo returned again, everything had changed. He was no longer silently delivering all living beings. Instead, he was making a big fuss. Although Song Jiangwang's little trick was seen through, the Dizang of Goguryeo still selflessly gave him the power to become the right-hand man of the Dizang of Goguryeo. Song Jiangwang became his emissary to deliver all living beings from torment. Wherever the emissary went, the power of Buddha rippled, and batch after batch of ghosts were converted, becoming the most loyal followers of Xidigarbha. Li Xiaotian looked on coldly, as if all of this had nothing to do with her. However, the Dizang of Goguryeo did not want her to stay out of it. He actually taught her the Xidigarbha Sutra and made her an emissary to spread his beliefs and Buddhism for him. Li Xiaotian originally refused, but when she thought about how she was now weak and was just a ghost, if she did not cultivate, she would not be able to help Tang Zheng. Therefore, she changed her mind and practiced the Xidigarbha Sutra diligently. The Dizang of Goguryeo did not hide anything. He guided her in the cultivation of the Xidigarbha Sutra, and her cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. The Xidigarbha Sutra was not the same as ordinary cultivation techniques. It focused on epiphany. Before epiphany, there was no specific cultivation level. Once epiphany, powerful cultivation would come uninvited. This was just like the Dizang of Goguryeo, who directly advanced to the Mahayana realm after an epiphany. Although Li Xiaotian cultivated the Xidigarbha Sutra, she did not work for the Dizang of Goguryeo in good faith. She did not do her best to spread Buddhism for him. On the contrary, the followers of the Dizang of Goguryeo who followed her spared no effort in spreading the news. She was like a bystander, witnessing the increase of the Dizang of Goguryeo's followers little by little. Many a little makes a mickle, and water makes a sea. These followers gathered into an ocean, and the belief that all living beings were equal was deeply rooted in their hearts. This spread was very successful. Without the obstruction of the 10 kings of hell, it was almost like a spark of fire starting a prairie fire. Li Xiaotian witnessed all of this, but her belief was not shaken in the slightest. All of this seemed to indicate that in the next moment, all living beings would be equal in the world of spirits and souls, and everyone would be followers of the Dizang of Goguryeo. Song Jiangwang was in despair. It seemed that he had underestimated the influence of the Dizang of Goguryeo and the power of the Xidigarbha Sutra. Once the spread was complete, his life would come to an end. However, he was helpless. Under the eyes of the followers of the Dizang of Goguryeo, there was no way to stop all of this. Even slacking off would not have much effect. The Dizang of Goguryeo seemed to believe that success was imminent. However, things did not go as planned, and a turning point appeared. An opposing force appeared out of nowhere. This force not only had vested interests in the original world of spirits and souls, but also the most ordinary ghost citizens. The world of spirits and souls did not only have vested interests like the 10 kings of hell, but there were vested interests in every class. Although most of them were converted, a small number of them finally chose to rebel. This rebel force and the converted force had a fierce confrontation, and both sides suffered casualties. This immediately thwarted the Dizang of Goguryeo's plan. This was also like a spark of fire. At the beginning, other rebel forces also emerged and fought fiercely with the followers. The world of spirits and souls was in chaos. This was completely beyond the expectations of the Dizang of Goguryeo. However, he was not angry because he firmly believed that the rebel forces were just a flash in the pan, and he would eventually achieve the final victory. He had to achieve the final victory. Song Jiangwang was overjoyed. He almost jumped up and cheered. This was what he had dreamt of. He prayed silently in his heart, hoping that the resistance forces could hold on a little longer and not be destroyed by Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. In fact, Song Jiangwang did not believe that the rebel forces would be useful. At most, they were just stalling for time. As long as the Dizang of Goguryeo struck, they would definitely fall apart and suffer a crushing defeat. Li Xiaotian was different. When she heard about the rebel forces, her heart was set. This meant that her judgment was the same. No matter how powerful the Dizang of Goguryeo was, it was impossible for him to convert every single one of them and destroy every single rebel force. Humans were different individuals and had their own personalities. The world of spirits and souls was no exception. Therefore, to unify everyone's thoughts, there might be a certain degree of success, but it would never be a complete success. This was a truth that went against the laws and human nature, and had been tested by countless history. Li Xiaotian cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra. She did not believe in the philosophy of the Dizang of Goguryeo, but she did not reject the Ksitigarbha Sutra. The Ksitigarbha Sutra was a scripture, and naturally, it was all-inclusive. It also had the concept of salvation and equality. She absorbed it selectively and actually benefited a lot. The Dizang of Goguryeo did not sit idly by. He saw that there were more and more signs of resistance, especially in the wilderness outside the cities. There were especially many rebel forces. Chapter 1371. The Heavenly Realm. A cheer rang out in this world. Tang Zheng hesitated for a long time before finally naming this new world. A deep sense of pride arose spontaneously. This was his world. He was the creator of this world, the well-deserved god of this world. In the future, when my skills improve, I must make this world full of vitality. Not just some grass, but all kinds of spirit beasts and immortal herbs. Perhaps, my people can also live in this world. No one can threaten them. This thought was deeply rooted in the depths of his mind, causing his heart to palpitate. If this was really realized, then he could keep the enemy out. This world opened this door because of the combination of the sky-devouring technique and the heavenly book. The heavenly book is not under my control. Since the Emperor of Heaven and Li Xiaotian both know it, I must not leak the sky-devouring technique. Otherwise, the enemy can also come to the heavenly realm by combining these two techniques. Then, I won't be the only one who controls the heavenly realm. Tang Zheng was very smart. He immediately thought of this key point and became deeply vigilant. The most important part of the sky-devouring technique was hidden in the Langya Pavilion. Other than the Dragon Clan, humans could not enter at all. This ensured that he was the only one who could truly cultivate the sky-devouring technique. He could barely suppress his excitement. Unable to explore more information about the heavenly realm, his divine sense simply returned to the real world. In the sea of bitterness, he floated in the sea. Golden and green light mixed all over his body. The green light was the light emitted by his vital qi. It formed a sharp contrast with the golden light emitted by the Buddhist power. In the 9th main meridian, the confrontation between the Buddhist power and the Tao power had reached a white-hot stage. No one was giving in to the other. They had completely refined the energy of the Golden Crow's soul and made it a part of them. This caused Tang Zheng to still be stuck at the threshold of the Mahayana realm. The Buddhist power and the Tao power were almost the same. Both had reached the 9th stage of the divine transformation realm. However, because neither side had broken through, Tang Zheng's cultivation did not increase. However, in the dark, Tang Zheng had a clear feeling that his strength was increasing. When he activated the heavenly book, the Tao power, which was his vital qi, flowed freely. When he chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra, the Buddhist power was also like an arm. The two energies actually obeyed his command. These two completely different energies coexisted in his body, creating a strange scene. When Dizang of Goguryeo imparted the Ksitigarbha Sutra to him, he never dreamed that such a scene would occur. Dizang of Goguryeo was very confident in his Ksitigarbha Sutra. He believed that if Tang Zheng recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra day and night, he would definitely be influenced by the sutra and be converted. This so-called enlightenment was a change from the inside to the outside. The consciousness would change, and the body would also undergo earth-shattering changes. The true chi that he had cultivated for many years would be converted into Buddhist power by the Ksitigarbha meridians. This was a secret that many people did not know about. Dizang of Goguryeo did not point it out either. Dizang of Goguryeo had always believed that his Ksitigarbha Sutra was the true essence of the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was only natural for him to convert other powers. Furthermore, it was a matter of great benefit to Tang Zheng. This was a benefit to Tang Zheng, not a harm to him. Therefore, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had a kind heart. Dizang of Goguryeo definitely did not expect that Tang Zheng would coincidentally obtain a supreme technique, the Heavenly Book, which could actually be on par with the Ksitigarbha Sutra. As a result, a huge balance appeared in Tang Zheng's body, allowing the two energies to coexist. Of course, this coexistence was not a peaceful coexistence. It was a confrontation. However, no one could do anything to the other. Tang Zheng did not have the mood to think about this. After seeing the two energies go through a white-hot confrontation, they still could not do anything to each other. They actually gradually subsided. He simply ignored them. After all, they could not hurt him for the time being. All his thoughts were on the sea of bitterness. If he could get out of this sea of bitterness, that was the most important thing. Previously, he thought that the Ksitigarbha Sutra was the key to getting out of this sea of bitterness. Now, it seemed that he was too optimistic. Although the Ksitigarbha Sutra had brought about many changes, it did not allow him to escape from this hellish place. Looking at the vast sea of bitterness, he was almost desperate. Whether it was the Heavenly Book or the Ksitigarbha Sutra, there was no way out. Was he really going to be trapped in the sea of bitterness forever? Li Xiaotian was still waiting for him to save her. If he did not appear, what if something bad happened to her? Even if she was safe, what if she was reincarnated? If she drank Meng Po's soup and reincarnated, then what was the use of him finding her? What if she was reincarnated as a man? Did he still have to love a man? He struggled in the sea of bitterness in distress. Time flew by, and he was at his wits' end. The human world changed too quickly. In the world of spirits and souls, the storm had not yet subsided. Instead, it was becoming more and more intense. However, Dizang of Goguryeo's supernatural power was unparalleled. In the end, he suppressed most of the resistance forces, leaving only a small group of resistance forces to hide. Li Xiaotian followed Dizang of Goguryeo to fight in the north and south. Her footprints almost measured every corner of the world of spirits and souls. The vastness of the world of spirits and souls was difficult to cover in a word. After she had seen so much, her state of mind had undergone earth-shaking changes. In the past, she was resourceful and far-sighted. She thought of what others thought, and even thought of things that others did not. Now, she could almost be called a demon. Her wisdom was so profound that it made people tremble in fear. She had advised Dizang of Goguryeo several times and analyzed the situation. Compared to Dizang of Goguryeo, she was even better. This made Dizang of Goguryeo look at her in a new light. Song Jiangwang, who had always thought of himself as wise and responsible, saw this scene. He suddenly felt like the waves behind the Yangtze River slapped the front on the beach. His role seemed to be getting smaller and smaller. However, Dizang of Goguryeo still did not deprive him of his identity as an emissary. It seemed that he wanted him to witness Dizang of Goguryeo's success wholeheartedly. Li Xiaotian did not pledge allegiance to Dizang of Goguryeo. She still insisted on her beliefs. However, she practiced her strategy in actual combat and gained a lot. The world of spirits and souls was equivalent to a battlefield for her to practice. However, she was certain that no matter how powerful her strategy was, no matter how powerful it would not be able to completely extinguish the flames of resistance. In fact, it was true. She occasionally missed Tang Zheng. She knew that Dizang of Goguryeo had locked Tang Zheng in the sea of suffering. However, she did not know how to get to the sea of suffering. She concentrated on comprehending the Ksitigarbha Sutra. It seemed that she hoped that the Ksitigarbha Sutra could give her courage and lead her to the sea of suffering. After all, Dizang of Goguryeo cultivated the sea of suffering. Therefore, he could freely trap people in the sea of suffering. If she also concentrated on cultivating the Ksitigarbha Sutra, maybe one day the Ksitigarbha Sutra would give her the answer. Dizang of Goguryeo's deep eyes often stared at Li Xiaotian for a long time. He did not say a word. In fact, he did not even say a word in the end. However, he had seen through Li Xiaotian's thoughts. He did not object, or rather, he did not make it public. He believed that Li Xiaotian's devout comprehension of the Ksitigarbha Sutra would one day be converted by the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Tang Zheng had long forgotten the concept of time. His mind was sometimes immersed in the sea of suffering. Sometimes he went to the heavenly realm. He wandered back and forth between the two worlds. Suddenly, when his gaze stopped on those small grasses, his gaze stopped, and he was firmly attracted to them. Those small grasses were just an attempt for him to realize. He did not take it to heart. After all, for a person, the small grasses were really an ordinary existence. They were really not worth paying too much attention to. Therefore, when his gaze inadvertently fell on the small grasses this time, the shock in his eyes was indescribable. What's going on? He was stunned. His pair of eyes were completely occupied by the small grasses. Small grasses? Is this still the small grasses that I created? He muttered to himself. In fact, he would actively sense any movement in the world of spirits and souls, or rather, any change. However, this time, he did not have a way for a long time. He was impatient and his mind was almost completely occupied by how to get away. Therefore, it caused a sudden change. It was precisely this sudden change that made him so surprised that his jaw almost fell into the sea of suffering. He saw that the originally most ordinary grasses in the world had undergone earth-shaking changes. The stems and leaves had become larger, green, and exuded a faint green light. This was a situation that would not appear in the human world. Even if there was a genetic mutation, such an outrageous thing would never happen. These were not small grasses. They were simply something else. This was not the most surprising thing. He was more amazed by the strong aura on the small grasses. Generally, spiritual grasses that were created by heaven and earth would contain spiritual energy, such as the heaven-fragrant flower that he picked on ordinary balance. Because it contained spiritual energy, even the red-chained snake tried to take it for its own, so it guarded it firmly. The aura contained in this mutated small grasses was different from spiritual energy, but it had the same effect. This was because the small grasses emitted the power of stars, which was a higher level of energy than spiritual energy. The power of stars. How can this small grasses emit the power of stars? Tang Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. The power of stars was contained in the stars, not in this world. Anyway, he had observed this world for a long time. There was no night, the sky was always bright, and there were no stars. Since there were no stars, where did the power of stars come from? Could it be that this world can produce the power of stars? He suddenly had a whim and immediately focused his energy to sense this world. However, other than the power of stars emitted by the small grasses in front of him, there was not even the slightest trace of the power of stars in the other places. Forget it for now. Since the creatures of this world can produce the power of stars, then it will definitely be beneficial to me. The power of stars is much better than spiritual energy. How can I miss this great opportunity? Thus, he focused all his attention on these small grasses. The power of stars was like wisps of smoke, floating up and disappearing in midair. At the same time, a part of the power of stars immediately appeared in his body. True Qi was not unfamiliar with the power of stars. As soon as it saw it, it immediately refined it. As his cultivation increased, the speed of refining the power of stars also increased greatly. After the small grasses lost the power of stars, they immediately withered and turned into a strand of yellow grass. They did not have their previous spirituality at all. With the power of stars, his true Qi increased greatly. It was like he could break through his limit at any time. He had an epiphany, so he naturally did not want to give up halfway. Although taking away the power of stars would cause the small grasses to wither, he still had to do it. Chapter 1372. Rumble. True Qi surged endlessly and soared into the sky. With a loud bang, the sea of bitterness boiled and set off stormy waves. Tang Zheng's body was covered in green light, overshadowing the golden light. The Buddhist power tried to resist, but found that the surge of true Qi was unstoppable. The vast and mighty power of the stars flowed through his meridians. His Jinqi was like a thirsty baby, constantly absorbing the energy. The Buddhist power witnessed all of this, understood its crisis, and immediately reacted. A burst of Buddhist power entangled the star power, trying to refine it. However, the star power kept colliding, not giving the Buddhist power a chance. The Buddhist power could not restrain it, and could only watch as the star power slipped away and was finally refined into a wisp of true Qi. The power of the stars was different from ordinary energy. Tang Zheng could refine it, but the Buddha's power was powerless. Tang Zheng discovered this point, and was surprised and happy. His true Qi could finally soar into the sky, overshadowing the Buddhist power, so that his cultivation could go further. As soon as the thought came, a change happened. Boom! With a loud bang, the green light completely overshadowed the golden light. The golden light was dying, and finally, it completely disappeared. Tang Zheng bathed in the bright green light, and his eyes were shining. He shouted in an earth-shattering voice, "Mahayana realm." He finally broke through. The star power was the last straw to break through the threshold. He succeeded. The joy was indescribable, and it filled his whole body. His fatigue was swept away, and he seemed to be full of energy and fighting spirit. Roar! He roared to the sky, and a column of water rose into the sky, like a dragon swinging its tail. Is this the first grade of Mahayana realm? He recalled this wonderful world, and his mood was unsettled. Hey, the true Qi is still increasing, and there is no sign of it stopping. Suddenly, he found something strange. His eyes immediately lit up. He was no stranger to this situation. Many times when his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, this familiar scene would occur. Second grade of Mahayana realm? His eyes were shining, and he was both looking forward to it and muttering excitedly. Boom! Another thunderbolt struck out of the blue, and the green light around his body became a little brighter. He had really broken through and reached the second stage of the Mahayana realm. Inside the 9th main meridian, a vast amount of true Qi was flowing. Although he only had 1 main meridian now, and the amount of true Qi stored was a little less than when he had 9 main meridians, the quality of each strand of true Qi was completely different. This was a qualitative victory, not something that could be covered up by the accumulation of quantity. His true Qi broke through the second bottleneck and finally calmed down. However, Tang Zheng's heart was unable to calm down. Not only had he crossed the threshold to the Grand Ascension stage, but he had also reached the second stage of the Grand Ascension stage, which meant that his cultivation base was on par with the Asura. In the past, he used to persuade the Asura with benefits and emotions. That was the only way to restrain the Asura. Now, he didn't need these illusory things at all. He could use his own strength to suppress the Shura. Aside from the Shura saber being very powerful, the Shura possessed a large amount of Yin Qi that could cause harm to others. Tang Zheng had the 9-sun saint constitution, so he was not afraid of Yin Qi at all. Therefore, he was almost invincible against the Shura. He was very clear about this and knew what it meant. Li Shaotian and the Shura's fate was unknown, so he did not have time to carefully savor the surprise of breaking through. He immediately activated his true Qi. Since his cultivation base had broken through, would it be possible to leave this damned place? The mighty true Qi began to circulate. In an instant, a green light soared into the sky, turning the sea of misery green. Whoosh! The sound of water rang out. He finally rose from the surface of the water and hovered in midair. It turned out that he had no way to escape the shackles of the sea of misery. Now that he had finally succeeded, he was overjoyed and subconsciously turned back. Everything was the same as before. There was no such thing as repenting and being saved. The vast sea of misery still had no end in sight. He could not help but feel gloomy. Damn it, there's no such thing as repenting and being saved. He did not give up. After all, he had flown out of the sea, which was a huge improvement. If his cultivation base improved further, would he be able to completely escape from the sea of misery? However, he did not have the power of the stars now, and there was not enough spiritual energy or power of the stars in the sea of misery for him to cultivate. How could he improve his cultivation base? When he thought of this, his heart almost died. He had almost walked into a dead end. Dizang of Goguryeo, you're really good at trapping me in the sea of misery. How can I escape from the sea of misery? Do you really want me to agree with your idea? No. He immediately shook his head. From the bottom of his heart, he could not believe it. There was no way he could fake it. Looking at the sea of misery below him, he was speechless for a long time. His figure was reflected on the surface of the sea. He was lonely and helpless, as if he had been abandoned by the world. I won't be abandoned by the world. He shook his head absent-mindedly. I have my own world, how can I be abandoned? That's right. He paused for a moment, and his eyes glowed as he stared at the boundless sea of misery. The sea of misery is boundless, repent and you'll be saved. If I make the sea of misery disappear, will I be able to break this spell? This was indeed a wonderful idea, and it was unusually bold. The Dizang of Goguryeo never dreamed that someone would want to make the sea of misery disappear. One must know that the sea of misery was so big that even the Dizang of Goguryeo did not know about it. That was why he sighed about the sea of misery being boundless. Since he had an idea, he naturally had to put it into practice. Thus, Tang Zheng activated his vast and mighty true qi and used the swallowing heavens technique. A huge black hole appeared out of thin air. This black hole was countless times bigger than before, as if it could devour the world. The sound of the wind immediately rang out. The airflow in the sky was completely sucked into the black hole. In an instant, the wind and clouds changed, and huge waves were set off in the sea. This was caused by the terrifying attraction of the sky-devouring technique. When the moon was close to Earth, it would create a tidal scene, causing the seawater hundreds of thousands of miles away to move. At this moment, the attraction of the black hole in the sky was no less terrifying than the attraction of the moon to Earth. Therefore, the waves immediately soared into the sky, as if they were going to cover the sky. Tang Zheng was surging with emotions, and he secretly regretted it. He was blinded by one's vision. He only thought of using the Ksitigarbha Sutra to escape, but he did not think of using the sky-devouring technique. The sea of misery was a sea. Although the seawater was very strange, the sky-devouring technique had already reached the realm of moving the sea. Wasn't moving the sea of misery within the range of the sky-devouring technique? Once the black hole sucked the sea of misery away, it would be in the heaven realm. The heaven realm was under Tang Zheng's control. No matter how magical the sea of misery was, he had the final say in the heaven realm. The sea of misery churned, and the waves had already soared into the sky, spanning between heaven and earth. At this moment, there were only waves between heaven and earth. The sky had disappeared, and there was only seawater. The black hole was suspended in mid-air, and the waves surged into the black hole one after another. With a whoosh, they disappeared into the black hole. Then, more waves were sucked into the black hole. Tang Zheng's consciousness immediately immersed itself in the heaven realm. It started to rain in the heaven realm, and it kept falling from the sky to the ground. The ground was moistened by the seawater and became moist. It was as if this lifeless world had a trace of vitality because of the appearance of water. There was more and more seawater in the sky, and soon, a layer of water formed in the sky. The seawater did not fall directly from the sky. Instead, it gathered in the sky and only drizzled. Tang Zheng was stunned for a moment. With a thought, the seawater fluctuated violently, and the rain became heavier. However, the layer of water did not collapse in the end. It still stubbornly stayed in midair. He did not seem to be able to control this layer of water like he could control the soil or other energy. This seawater is strange. It's not completely under my control even in the heaven realm, Tang Jing muttered to himself in puzzlement. Rise. However, he did not stop there. He pointed his finger at the sea and shouted, "Let's go." The seawater was stirred by an invisible force. As expected, it rushed up and turned into a water column that fell from the sky. Boom! 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 A few more water columns fell from the sky. In an instant, the sky and the earth were connected by these water columns. These water columns were like tornadoes, constantly moving. Wherever they passed, they formed canyons. The rain quickly gathered in the canyons, forming rivers that flowed endlessly. More and more water from the bitter sea was sucked into the heaven realm. The water columns became bigger and bigger, as if they were going to occupy the entire heaven realm. The wind and clouds changed, the sky fell and the earth cracked, and the mountains and rivers changed. Tang Jing saw this scene and seemed to have a feeling. Could the so-called way of heaven be the evolution of the mountains and rivers, the changes of the wind and clouds? This seemed to be a manifestation of the will of the way of heaven. This flash of inspiration made him feel as if he had been struck by lightning. He stared blankly at this scene, but the feeling in his heart became clearer and stronger. He did not know when the heavenly book started to circulate quietly. It echoed with everything that happened in the heaven realm, making his feeling more and more clear. Yes, the way of heaven is contained in all of this. In the past, I've always heard others talk about the way of heaven. In fact, the way of heaven is not complicated. It's just that people think of it as too complicated. The changes in this world are the best manifestation of the way of heaven. As long as I carefully comprehend this series of changes, there will definitely be new discoveries. He was overjoyed, but he gradually suppressed his surging emotions. His mind was completely immersed in all of these changes. The water columns became bigger and bigger, constantly moving. In the end, they gradually gathered together, forming a huge water column that connected the sky and the earth. Boom! The earth trembled and quickly caved in, forming a huge pit. The seawater was completely poured into it, and the water from countless rivers flowed into the pit. The seawater filled the bottom of the pit, but it did not stop. It kept expanding in all directions. In the end, the pit was completely filled with water, forming an ocean. Yes, this was an ocean. Although it was not as boundless as the bitter sea, there was no end to it. However, it was bigger than any ocean in the human world. The naked eye could not see the end of it. Tang Zhang was the master of this world. He did not need to look at it. He could see the end with a glance. However, his mind was deeply shocked by this scene. His vital qi seemed to be resonating with the seawater. It flowed out of his meridians and flowed to other parts of his body. Those areas were where the destroyed meridians were originally located. Chapter 1373. The place where the vital energy flowed was like the sea in the heaven realm. Wherever it passed, there were thousands of ravines, as if rivers were forming in the body. Tang Zheng was deep in thought. He did not know what the vital energy would eventually evolve into. He could not help but look forward to it. These are new meridians. The vital energy is reshaping the meridians. He cried out in surprise, looking at this scene in disbelief. Other than the 9th main meridian, the other 8 main meridians were all destroyed. Now that the meridians were reshaped, he would have more vital energy stored in his meridians in the future, which would be more advantageous in battle. The vital energy is so mysterious. It has such an effect. He was amazed. New meridians formed in front of his eyes. This was equivalent to reshaping his body, which gave him a very magical feeling. The water in the heaven realm surged and gathered in the boundless sea. The waterfall-like sea in the sky was also suspended in mid-air, but it shrunk a little and became like a river. The heavy rain stopped, leaving only the huge waterfall that connected the heaven and earth. It was like a huge waterfall that fell from the sky. Looking up at the huge waterfall, no waterfall in the world could be compared to it. It was like the water from the heaven realm flowing to the earth. As more and more water from the sea of bitterness was absorbed into the world, the water in the sky changed. It was as if they were no longer limited to one place, but rather meandered in all directions, like rivers that extended in all directions as they floated in midair. Tang Zheng had a premonition that there was so much water in the sea of bitterness that even if the waterfall fell for countless years, it might not be able to transfer all of it from the heaven realm to the earth realm. He could not completely control the water of the sea of bitterness, so he might as well let it be like this. It could become a magnificent wonder in the heaven realm, adding a lot of charm to the heaven realm. He was deep in thought, and suddenly said, "Then let's call it the Celestial River. It's a river in the heaven realm, and it's very vivid." The Celestial River, this magical river finally had a name. Above the 9 heavens, the sound of the waterfall was deafening. His consciousness returned to reality, and the changes in the sea of bitterness attracted his attention. He exclaimed in disbelief. The water level of the sea of bitterness had decreased. Although he still could not see the end, he had this feeling. This was enough to show that the sea of bitterness was not unchanging. Once the sky-swallowing skill absorbed enough of the bitter sea's water, the bitter sea would disappear and he would have a chance to escape. Rumble. The mighty true qi surged endlessly in the new meridians, like a wild horse out of control, giving people a very shocking feeling. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up. The power of the true qi was extraordinary. It had actually molded new meridians. These meridians were not the main meridians, but were instead thousands of small meridians. There are big rivers and small rivers in the human world. Compared to the main meridians, these smaller meridians were like small rivers. However, there were so many of them that they were densely packed all over the body. They could store an extremely vast amount of true qi. Compared to the other 8 main meridians, the amount of true qi stored in Tang Zheng's meridians was much greater. In other words, when Tang Zheng faced an enemy, he would have more true qi than others, which was of course a good thing. Henceforth, his body structure would be completely different from others. He only had one main meridian, but he possessed true qi that was not inferior to other people's main meridian. The true qi was vast and mighty, trying to seize every meridian. However, the Buddhist power did not completely compromise. The true qi suppressed the Buddhist power, but the Buddhist power was still not to be underestimated. Boom! The Buddhist power surged and rushed into the meridians, quickly occupying a lot of meridians. At once, the two forces were competing in the meridians, seizing each other's meridians. It was like two gangs fighting for territory. Tang Zheng rolled his eyes helplessly. These two forces were sworn enemies, and there was no way to reconcile them. Suddenly, he had a thought. Since the Buddhist power and the Tao power were at odds with each other, what about the people who cultivated these two techniques? Would they also become two camps, constantly fighting and killing each other? He was shocked by the idea. If that was the case, wouldn't the Dizang of Goguryeo and the 10 kings of hell be at odds with each other? A war was bound to break out in the world of spirits and souls. He still did not know that the 10 kings of hell had become a thing of the past, and only King Songjiang was left. If the Dizang of Goguryeo defeats the 10 kings of hell, in the future, will he compete with the forces of the human world? No. He denied the idea again. People from the world of spirits and souls could not stay in the human world for a long time, just like how living people could not stay in the world of spirits and souls for a long time. The Dizang of Goguryeo could not lead the people from the world of spirits and souls to kill the human world, so his worries were groundless. He patted his chest, feeling a lingering fear, and secretly rejoiced. The Ksitagarbha Sutra that the Dizang of Goguryeo cultivated was another type of technique, which fundamentally rejected the previous cultivation system. The two completely different systems will definitely repel each other, and if a conflict breaks out, I can't let my guard down. He silently warned himself. The Tao power and the Buddhist power competed with each other, and in the end, the Tao power was still slightly better than the Buddhist power. The water of the sea of bitterness boiled and turned into pillars of water that soared into the sky, and was sucked into the huge black hole. As time passed, the water of the sea of bitterness became less and less. Now, there was no need to feel, and could be judged directly with the naked eye. Tang Zhang's eyes lit up, and he stared straight at the sea of bitterness. His excitement was overflowing, and he looked forward to the moment when the sea water was sucked dry. After some time, the wind died down, and the waves calmed down. As far as the eyes could see, the bottom of the sea of bitterness could be seen. Ha ha ha, I'm finally going to succeed. Tang Zhang looked up and laughed wildly, unable to hide his joy. This narrow escape from death was truly not an easy one. His eyes became firm, and he gritted his teeth. Li Xiaotian, I'm going back now, wait for me. Crack. There was a thunderbolt in the clear sky, but there was no lightning. The space trembled violently. The sea water boiled more and more violently, and the bottom of the sea cracked open. The mountains shook and the earth shook, as if the sky was falling. Tang Zhang stood in the sea water that just reached his knees. He looked around, and there was a faint sense of expectation in his heart. Is this damn sea of bitterness going to collapse? Crack. A crack appeared in the sky, like a huge wound that was torn open, and it was a shocking sight. The last of the sea water formed a huge wave, and was pulled away from the ground by the suction of the black hole. With a splash, the sky was filled with sea water. A black light flashed, and the sea water disappeared completely, being sucked into the black hole. Tang Zhang's eyes lit up, and he cheered in surprise. Success. Yes. The water of the sea of bitterness that stretched as far as the eye could see was completely absorbed by him using the sky-swallowing technique. The sky-swallowing technique's ability to move the sea was indeed worthy of its reputation. He once again experienced the great power of the sky-swallowing technique, and he couldn't help but look forward to the next stage, the sky-swallowing realm. Crack. Boom. Chapter 1374. The sea of bitterness was annihilated, the mountains shook, and the earth shook. The huge ghost world also shook as if there was an earthquake. The ghost world was not like the human world. Since its birth, there had never been an earthquake. All the living beings in the ghost world were shocked. They looked at the ground under their feet in disbelief. There were even huge cracks. The Styx River set off huge waves. The bridge of helplessness was instantly submerged. The river overflowed the embankment and spread in all directions. All the living beings in the ghost world were scared out of their wits. They ran for their lives. Although the Styx River was dangerous, it had never been flooded. No one knew why the Styx River suddenly became angry. The turmoil in the world of spirits and souls made everyone nervous. Even those who were preaching Buddhism for Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had to stop and flee. In Fengdu City, Dizang of Goguryu's eyes burst out like two sharp arrows. He exclaimed in disbelief, "How is this possible?" Whoosh! He rose into the air and floated in midair. His eyes were like torches as he swept through every inch of land in Fengdu City. Those cracks were like ugly scars that were scattered all over Fengdu City. How is this possible? Impossible. His lips trembled as he kept muttering to himself. He could no longer maintain his previous calmness. Li Xiaotian had been following Dizang of Goguryo. Naturally, she also noticed this abnormal situation. Immediately, she also flew into the air. She had a small achievement in cultivating the Ksitigarbha Sutra, so she could also fly. Although she did not agree with some of Dizang of Goguryo's views, it did not hinder her from comprehending the Ksitigarbha Sutra. There were many mysterious places in the Ksitigarbha Sutra that were enough for her to benefit a lot. Seeing Dizang of Goguryo turn pale with fright and talk to himself, Li Xiaotian was deeply shocked. During this period of time, she had a certain understanding of Dizang of Goguryo. He seemed to only have one emotion, which was no matter what happened, he would remain calm and dignified. However, this scene made her completely understand that Dizang of Goguryeo was not much different from other people. He still had all kinds of emotions, but she covered them up. What happened? She asked curiously. The other experts of the ghost realm who were flying in the air also looked at Dizang of Goguryeo with burning eyes, waiting for his answer. Dizang of Goguryeo seemed to turn a deaf ear to him. He looked at the ground that was riddled with holes and said nothing. Suddenly a wisp of black smoke leaped out from the crack. Immediately after, countless strands of black energy floated out from every crack. In an instant, Necropolis seemed to be shrouded by black energy, gradually forming a black fog that blocked one's line of sight. Li Xiaotian wrinkled her delicate nose as she sensed a peculiar aura from the black fog. There seems to be something in this black fog, but I can't see or grasp it. Li Xiaotian said thoughtfully. The others nodded in agreement. However, Dizang of Goguryeo did not say a word, so no one could guess the specific situation. The black fog shrouded the entire ghost realm and gathered in Necropolis from all directions. Although the ghost realm was vast, the speed of the black fog gathering was almost like a flash of lightning, catching people off guard. Necropolis stood on the bank of the Styx River and was surrounded by it. It was difficult for people from the ghost realm to fly over the Styx River, which was a natural moat. However, in front of the black fog, the Styx River turned into a thin piece of paper that would break with a poke. Under everyone's gaze, the black fog swaggered across the Styx River and surrounded Necropolis. It covered the sky and the sun, and Necropolis was dark. Everyone was frightened and looked around in panic. The black fog had already drowned them. Being in the black fog, many people were frightened, as if they were afraid that the black fog would hurt them. However, the black fog only passed by them and did not harm them. Ah! Suddenly, a cry of surprise sounded in the crowd like a thunderbolt, attracting everyone's attention. Look at where the black fog is flying to. This cry of surprise came from Li Xiaotian. She was meticulous and actually discovered this unusual scene. When the others heard this, they all looked over and actually discovered an inconceivable scene. The black fog was flying toward Dizang of Goguryeo in the sky. Why was the black fog underground flying toward him? Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene. Li Xiaotian narrowed her eyes slightly and stared at the black fog with bright eyes. She also stared at the Dizang of Goguryeo, who was in the middle of it, as if he was the center of a storm. Dizang of Goguryeo's face was ashen, and there was only seriousness in his face. In Necropolis, all the creatures had been converted and became Dizang of Goguryeo's most devout believers. Looking at this scene, they were worried about Dizang of Goguryeo. Be careful! Someone screamed in fright and flew toward Dizang of Goguryeo. Before he got close to the Dizang of Goguryeo, the black fog went into his mouth and nose. He suddenly froze and stopped in midair. After a while, the black fog came out of his mouth and nose again. The man's eyes shone fiercely and he roared wildly. His voice was full of anger. In addition, this voice seemed to have magic. It could also arouse the anger of others and make them change color. Li Xiaotian's heart was filled with anger for no reason. Her eyes were red, and she gritted her teeth as if she had seen the enemy who killed her father. However, she immediately came back to her senses and regained her senses. However, her expression changed greatly as she looked at the man in disbelief. Why did his voice have such magic? Before she could figure out the cause and effect, the man exploded in the air with a bang, turning into specks of yin qi and drifting away with the wind. This scene deeply shocked Li Xiaotian and the other living beings in the world of spirits and souls. They looked at each other. Not only Li Xiaotian, but the others were also affected by the roar just now. This black fog is dangerous. They immediately realized this and retreated one after another. Fortunately, the black fog was gathering toward the Dizang of Goguryeo and just passed by them. It seemed that as long as they did not target the black fog would not make things difficult for them. It seems that once you get close to the Dizang of Goguryeo, the black fog will launch an attack. What the hell is this black fog? It has such great power. Li Xiaotian muttered in her heart. Could it be the doing of the resistance forces? She had a thought, but after thinking about it carefully, she had to deny this idea. The resistance forces did not have such great ability. The earthquake just now had affected the entire world of spirits and souls. The resistance forces definitely did not have such ability. Then, who could it be? Li Xiaotian could not figure it out. She could only look at the Dizang of Goguryeo. He was almost hidden in the black fog and was very blurry. She could not see him clearly. Seeing the danger of the black fog, the others retreated. However, when they saw Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva in the black fog, they all revealed resolute expressions. Instead of retreating, they charged forward. A few more people flew up and shouted loudly as they rushed towards Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva in an attempt to help him. The Dizang of Goguryeo did not seem to see all this. The black fog seemed to block his sight and blind his mind. He did not care about these people who were seeking death. These people were indeed seeking death. The black fog did the same thing and once again drilled into their mouths and noses. They froze in midair. Accompanied by a loud noise, these people followed in the footsteps and exploded, turning into wisps of yin qi. The explosion deeply shocked Li Xiaotian's heart. Her face was as calm as water, and she said worriedly, "The Dizang of Goguryeo is still not moving. Can't he stop this black fog? Then the world of spirits and souls will be in danger." Roar! Suddenly, a deafening roar came from the black fog. It was like a strong shock wave, shaking the black fog and tearing a gap. Whoosh! Golden light shot out from the gap and shrouded Fengdu City. Everyone exclaimed in ecstasy, "The Dizang of Goguryeo." This was indeed the supernatural power of the Dizang of Goguryeo. The familiar golden light contained a strong Buddhist power. There was no doubt that the Dizang of Goguryeo was activating the Ksitigarbha Sutra and using the Buddhist power to resist this strange black fog. Li Xiaotian watched this scene without blinking. She really wanted to pull the Dizang of Goguryeo and ask him clearly what this black fog was. However, the Dizang of Goguryeo did not have the leisure to answer her. From the gap, not only did people see the golden light, but they also saw the figure of the Dizang of Goguryeo at the core of the black fog. He had already sat down cross-legged. A golden lotus platform appeared under him and slowly rotated. The Dizang of Goguryeo sat on the lotus platform and rotated along with it. His serious face flashed in front of them, and after a while, it flashed again and again. Li Xiaotian saw the difference between the Dizang of Goguryeo and his usual self. Usually, he was full of confidence and strategizing. But at this moment, there was deep worry between his eyebrows. He no longer had the determination to win. Can he resist the attack of the black fog? A question emerged in Li Xiaotian's heart. The black fog was different from other attacks. It was all-pervasive and powerful. Was the Dizang of Goguryeo its opponent? No one knew the result until the end. Li Xiaotian looked at this scene and pondered for a while. He felt that the Dizang of Goguryeo was not optimistic. If the Dizang of Goguryeo was captured, would it be a blessing or a curse for the world of ghosts? However, the others did not have this worry at all. After seeing the figure of the Dizang of Goguryeo, their eyes and all their attention were completely attracted by the Dizang of Goguryeo. In their hearts, the Dizang of Goguryeo was invincible, so they were not worried about the outcome of the Dizang of Goguryeo. These people seemed to be infected by the Dizang of Goguryeo. They also sat down cross-legged, put their hands together, and recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra. The Dizang of Goguryeo did not keep it to herself. She passed the general content of the Ksitigarbha Sutra to the people of the world of ghosts. However, when it came to the core power of the Ksitigarbha Sutra was deliberately omitted. But thousands of people meditated and recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Traces of golden light flew out of their mouths and intertwined into Sanskrit characters in midair. Although they couldn't speak Sanskrit on their own, they could do it perfectly if they worked together. The golden Sanskrit characters flew to the Dizang of Goguryeo and confronted the black fog directly. The black fog seemed to want to block the Sanskrit characters. As enemies, the confrontation between the two sides was very fierce. Some of the Sanskrit characters were exhausted, and some of the black fog disappeared. Both sides suffered losses. But a part of the golden Sanskrit characters still got in through the cracks and came to the front of the Dizang of Goguryeo. Then, it merged into his golden shining endless Kasaya. Chapter 1375. The golden light of the infinite cassock shone brightly, dispersing part of the black fog. However, the black fog did not give up and counterattacked crazily. Because, with the support of the Buddhist power of thousands of believers chanting the Ksitigarbha Sutra, the situation of the Dizang of Goguryeo improved significantly. However, wisps of black gas still appeared on his face, like black snakes swimming on his face. It was extremely terrifying. The contrast between gold and black was obvious. Li Xiaotian was the only one who was not involved. She watched this scene without blinking. She could feel that the aura of the Dizang of Goguryeo was changing. Although he had the upper hand, this kind of change was happening little by little under the influence of others. She did not know what this meant, whether this change was good or bad. She could only watch, not willing to miss any details. Roar! Suddenly, the black gas on the face of the Dizang of Goguryeo expanded. He opened his mouth and roared, the sound shaking the surroundings. His voice has changed. It seems to contain intense anger and killing intent. Li Xiaotian's heart trembled. She immediately saw the clues. When the Dizang of Goguryeo suppressed the king of hell with thunderous means, although he was decisive in killing, he did not have an intense killing intent. His every word and action was full of solemnity. However, this moment was completely different. The intense killing intent soared into the sky, far more terrifying than when the 10 kings of hell were enraged. How did he become like this? With Li Xiaotian's understanding of the Dizang of Goguryeo, this should not have happened to him. However, this scene was displayed in front of her. She could not ignore it. The changes of the Dizang of Goguryeo were far more than that. The battle in his body was even more intense and dangerous. No one could imagine it. The Dizang of Goguryeo also chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Sanskrit covered his body, supporting himself over and over again to overcome the external attack. The shock in his heart was unimaginable. He stared at the cracks on the ground as if he wanted to see through layer by layer. However, his gaze could not penetrate the depths of the ground. He wanted to see clearly what had happened in the sea of misery and how it had caused such a huge chain reaction. Most importantly, it had actually released that thing. This was what he feared the most. It wasn't easy for me to seal him in the sea of misery and make him one with the sea of misery. With his ruthless nature, there's no way he can turn back and escape the sea of misery. How could he be released? Could it be that Tang Zheng helped him? His heartstrings trembled, but he immediately rejected this idea. Impossible. Tang Zheng would not be able to come into contact with him, nor would he be able to help him. Most importantly, even if Tang Zheng were to come into contact with him, he would not be able to release him. It's impossible for Tang Zheng to break the restriction I set up. Dizang of Goguryeo's mind was in a whirl. After thinking clearly about the problems involved, he became even more confused. I sealed you once, so I can seal you a second time. Ksitigarbha Sutra, suppress. Dizang of Goguryeo shouted in his heart. Ha ha ha, Dizang of Goguryeo, you didn't expect this day to come, did you? An arrogant voice suddenly rang out. This voice startled everyone. They looked around in disbelief, but they did not see a real person at all. This voice seems a bit familiar. Where have I heard it before? Li Xiaotian was meticulous and immediately discovered the subtlety. In the world of spirits and souls, there were only a handful of voices that could leave a deep impression on her. Suddenly, her gaze was fixed on Dizang of Goguryeo. Her face was filled with suspicion and shock, and her heartstrings trembled. How could it be his voice? This voice turned out to be Dizang of Goguryeo's voice. She did not expect it at all. Although there were some changes in it, it was essentially Dizang of Goguryeo's voice. Many others seemed to have discovered this as well, and they all stared at Dizang of Goguryeo in horror. See, they've already discovered the clues. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, the prestige that you have established will soon be questioned. The voice continued to show off its strength, saying without fear. However, things did not go as they wished. The living beings of the ghost realm were not bewitched and led by this voice. They were loud and clear as they complained that this voice should not be alarmist and provoke their concern for Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. They were not buying this. Hehe, you're really capable. You actually have so many devoted believers. Hehe, this is good too. You can let me take advantage. Let him take advantage? Everyone's heart trembled. They did not understand what this sentence meant. Could it be that he still wanted to take the living beings of the world of spirits and souls for his own use? Was this not wishful thinking? Dizang of Goguryeo did not answer him. Instead, he used actual attacks to defend himself. He chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra, and Sanskrit words blurted out, transforming into thousands of illusions. They hovered above his head and turned into rays of golden light, enveloping him. Do you think you're the only one who knows the Ksitigarbha Sutra? You still want to use the Ksitigarbha Sutra to suppress me? Wishful thinking. Isn't it just the Ksitigarbha Sutra? I know it too. Then let's compete and see whose Ksitigarbha Sutra is more powerful. After the voice finished speaking, the Ksitigarbha Sutra also sounded in midair. However, there was no golden light. Instead, the wisps of black fog transformed into thousands of illusions and turned into Sanskrit words, fighting against the golden Sanskrit words. Black Sanskrit. Everyone's pupils shrank as they looked at the black Sanskrit words incredulously. The only difference between the golden and black Sanskrit words seemed to be the color, but if one carefully observed their essence, there were many differences. But the most important thing was how this voice could use the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Moreover, the depth of his understanding of the Ksitigarbha Sutra far surpassed the other disciples. Even Li Shaotian felt ashamed of his inferiority. Wasn't the Ksitigarbha Sutra the Dizang of Goguryeo's core cultivation method? How could this voice know it? Moreover, the Ksitigarbha Sutra that was displayed had thousands of changes. Dizang of Goguryeo had passed down the Ksitigarbha Sutra to thousands of people of the world of spirits and souls, but Li Shaotian believed that he definitely did not pass down the core part. But what this voice displayed was the core part of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Even Li Shaotian did not learn this core part. Everyone guessed that this person was definitely not ordinary and had a close relationship with the Dizang of Goguryeo. Dizang of Goguryeo was shocked and said, "You have ulterior motives. You actually changed the Ksitigarbha Sutra to display this kind of evil technique. This is a stain on the Ksitigarbha Sutra." Stain? I don't think so. The Ksitigarbha Sutra will display its greatest power in my hands. This is the true face of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. You have sealed its power, but I have truly released its full power. This voice was very arrogant. The more one listened, the more it sounded like the Dizang of Goguryeo's voice. One gold and one black, two Sanskrit characters began to fight in the air. They were of the same origin, so this battle was evenly matched. It stirred up the aura of the world. Black light and gold light danced in all directions, creating shockwaves that shook one's heart. Everyone raised their heads to watch this shocking battle. Dizang of Goguryeo was completely focused and gave it his all. But the opponent's figure still did not appear. There was only that black fog, mysterious and unfathomable. Unknowingly, the black Sanskrit characters gradually suppressed the gold Sanskrit characters. The Ksitigarbha Sutra's expression became unprecedentedly serious. Suddenly, he hysterically roared, "I will not let you succeed." The gold Sanskrit characters changed and condensed into a swastika character. It fell from the sky and suppressed the black Sanskrit characters. Boom! The sky shook and the earth shook. Almost everyone could not stand steadily. Screams rose and fell one after another. Li Shaotian also almost fell to the ground. He could not help but be deeply shocked by this attack. Many people's eyes lit up as they stared at the Dizang of Goguryeo. They cheered, "Dizang of Goguryeo is mighty. Ha ha ha, this is mighty? Then your vision is too narrow. You are no different from frogs at the bottom of a well." The voice sounded again, full of disdain. These words deeply irritated the crowd, and they all loudly rebuked and accused him. But the voice laughed wildly. "Do you know how disrespectful these words are? You respect the Dizang of Goguryeo so much. For you to say this about me is disgraceful, do you understand? Disgraceful? Nonsense, the one we respect is the Dizang of Goguryeo, not you. What's disgraceful about that? Our crusade against you is a righteous act. Don't try to quibble." Yes, quibble. The crowd was in an uproar. They continued to accuse the voice. "It seems that it is necessary for me to introduce myself," the voice said. Suddenly, the Dizang of Goguryeo roared. The power of his attack increased greatly and interrupted the voice. "Shut up." Cheers rose again. Everyone cheered for the Dizang of Goguryeo. At the scene, only Li Xiaotian was the most clear-headed. She keenly found a clue. The Dizang of Goguryeo was so afraid of the voice. It meant that the content of the words would be shocking. It could even threaten the Dizang of Goguryeo. The Dizang of Goguryeo had a high cultivation level. What would he be afraid of? What would threaten him? Prestige. She thought for a moment and immediately thought of the answer. The Dizang of Goguryeo had established a prestige in the world of spirits and souls. If he was threatened, it would only subvert his prestige. That would be the most fatal blow. The Dizang of Goguryeo would naturally do his best to stop it. What the voice was about to reveal was definitely a secret that no one knew about. Moreover, it involved Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, which was why Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was so afraid. Li Xiaotian's gossiping fire could not help but be aroused. She could not wait to know what the voice was going to say. However, she did not have the strength. There was no way for her to control the situation of this battle. Naturally, she could not immediately hear what she wanted to hear. However, she had a hunch. She had been with the Dizang of Goguryeo for a long time. She had never seen him so flustered and flustered. The voice was able to do that, which showed the terrifying power it contained. Perhaps it could really resist the Dizang of Goguryo's attack and say what it wanted to say. In order to prevent the other party from speaking, the Dizang of Goguryeo attacked like a storm, round after round. It was too much for the eyes to take in. He did not give the enemy a chance to breathe. Rumble. The confrontation of the two Sanskrit words caused Fengdu's city to suffer. Fengdu's city, which stood on the peak of the mountain, was on the verge of collapse. Sand and stones were flying, and the wind was blowing. Many houses were directly destroyed. Everyone was forced to retreat. They did not dare to watch this fierce battle from a close distance. Otherwise, they would lose their lives. Li Xiaotian was a smart person. She had already retreated far away, but her eyes never left the sky. The battle was getting more and more intense. The outcome was unpredictable. Li Xiaotian had experienced countless battles. She was experienced and had a unique vision. She secretly thought that the battle was getting more and more intense. It meant that it was coming to an end. The outcome would be revealed soon. Chapter 1376. When Fengdu Necropolis was almost destroyed, all the black fog in the world gathered in the sky above Fengdu Necropolis, turning into black Sanskrit characters that attacked the Dizang of Goguryeo from all directions. Infinite Kasaya. The Dizang of Goguryeo roared, and the infinite Kasaya flew up, overflowing with golden light as it circled around the Dizang of Goguryeo. Boom! 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 The black Sanskrit characters were destroyed, but they immediately reignited and surrounded the infinite Kasaya. In addition, many black Sanskrit characters surrounded the Dizang of Goguryeo. That voice seemed to have a chance to breathe, and it said loudly, "Dizang of Goguryeo, Are you afraid that I will tell the truth? Haven't you always boasted of being bright and upright? Actually, you are no different from others. Let me tell you, you have all been deceived by him. He also has a dark side, and he is not as great and bright as he looks on the surface. The Dizang of Goguryeo tried to stop it, but it was too late. The voice rumbled and clearly transmitted to everyone's ears. The Dizang of Goguryeo has a dark side? Everyone was shocked by this news. Whether it was the believers or Li Xiaotian, they all thought that the Dizang of Goguryeo was a selfless person who was wholeheartedly for the public good. Although Li Xiaotian questioned his philosophy, she did not question his character. However, this voice said that he had a dark side. She was very clear about what this meant, and she could not help but look at the Dizang of Goguryeo curiously. The Dizang of Goguryeo did not refute, and it seemed that he had tacitly agreed to this point, especially when the expression between his brows made his thoughts clear. This voice did not seem to be lying. Immediately, Li Xiaotian could not help but be curious about the so-called dark side of the Dizang of Goguryeo. Nonsense, slander. More and more complaints rang out from the crowd. The believers did not believe his words at all. This was simply nonsense. Dizang of Goguryeo was a supreme existence in their hearts. How could he have a dark side? Ha ha ha, a bunch of ignorant fools. The truth is right in front of you. Do you still not want to admit it? That voice shouted. The believer still shook his head in disbelief. Instead, he asked Dizang of Goguryeo for confirmation. Dizang of Goguryeo, quickly refute his nonsense. Dizang of Goguryeo did not refute. Instead, he fell into silence. Li Xiaotian frowned. He seemed to have thought of something, but he couldn't grasp it. The meaning of the voice was too confusing. The voice paused for a moment, then said word by word, I am his dark side, right in front of you. How do you think Dizang of Goguryeo will quibble? Whoosh! The cold wind howled, but no one made a sound. The silence was frightening. Everyone had an incredulous look on their faces. Even though Li Xiaotian had already thought of this, when he heard this, his eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. Indeed, no one would have thought of this. The so-called dark side of the Dizang of Goguryeo was actually this voice. Dizang of Goguryeo did not refute. Moreover, the other party vowed solemnly, so he was definitely not lying. No wonder this voice was the same as the Dizang of Goguryeo. He was the dark side of the Dizang of Goguryeo. Of course, it was the same voice. However, this dark side did not have a body. Was it just a black fog? Why was this so? Li Xiaotian tilted his head, puzzled. He stared at the Dizang of Goguryeo, as if he wanted to get an answer from his face. Dizang of Goguryeo sighed in his heart. He was extremely depressed. Ever since he had an epiphany, he had never felt such a deep sense of powerlessness and frustration. The content of this voice was the biggest taboo in his heart. He was very unwilling to mention it or even recall it. But after all, this was something that had happened to him before. He simply could not stay out of it. I always thought that you had become a thing of the past. I never thought that you would come back. After a long time, Dizang of Goguryeo finally said blankly. Actually, this is all thanks to you. The dark side said meaningfully. Dizang of Goguryeo asked in a deep voice, what do you mean? You suppressed me in the sea of bitterness for who knows how many years, so that I will never see the light of day. What kind of torture is this? It's a pity that you were too confident in yourself and did not believe that I could escape from the sea of bitterness. Dizang of Goguryeo snorted coldly, am I wrong? After so many years, have you escaped from the sea of bitterness? Of course you are not wrong. Although I am very dissatisfied with you, the two of us have one thing in common, and that is, we are very confident in ourselves. This is still worthy of praise. Tang Zheng. Dizang of Goguryeo was shocked, and the figure of Tang Zheng appeared in his mind. So his name is Tang Zheng. The dark side said with interest. When Li Xiaotian heard the two words Tang Zheng, her eyes lit up. After so long, she had not heard any news about Tang Zheng. Now that it was said by the dark side, it immediately attracted her attention. Tang Zheng is trapped in the sea of bitterness. What's wrong with that? Dizang of Goguryeo asked in confusion. Ha ha ha, of course it's no problem for me. On the contrary, I welcome him very much. He gave me a huge surprise. Back then, when he first came to the Sea of Bitterness, I saw him. It's just that I was suppressed by your great magical power and there was no way to communicate with Tang Zheng. I tried countless methods, but they all ended in vain. The dark side was disappointed and seemed to feel that it was a pity. If Tang Zheng heard this, he would be very surprised. Because, he did not find a second person in the Sea of Bitterness. But he had always been monitored by the dark side of Dizang of Goguryeo. Dizang of Goguryeo still had a lot of things that he could not figure out. He asked suspiciously, Tang Zheng's cultivation is not high. How could he let you out? Ha ha ha, your eyes have always been very accurate, but this time you are wrong. Tang Zheng is far more complicated and powerful than you think. Although I saw everything he did, I didn't completely see through him. The dark side said regretfully. I was wrong. How is that possible? He is clearly only at the 9th level of the divine transformation realm. Unless he comprehended the Ksitagarbha Sutra, there is no way for him to leave the Sea of Bitterness, let alone let you out. Dizang of Goguryeo said in disbelief. Now that I am in front of you, do you still doubt it? Isn't this convincing enough? The dark side asked, I know you must want to know how I got out. Dizang of Goguryeo did not say anything, but his expression had already revealed his inner thoughts. He wanted to know the answer too much. Tang Zheng does not know of my existence. He accidentally absorbed all the water in the Sea of Bitterness. If there is no water in the Sea of Bitterness, is it still the Sea of Bitterness? Naturally, it will collapse and your magical power will be ineffective. Therefore, I can easily escape from the sea of suffering and return to this familiar world, the dark side said in a single breath, without stopping. When Dizang of Goguryeo heard this, he almost staggered and fell to the ground. He said in surprise, What? You said he absorbed all the water in the Sea of Bitterness? Where did he absorb it to? A black hole. I don't know the specific situation, but that black hole gave me a very unusual feeling. It seemed to be able to devour everything. He moved the Sea of Bitterness away so easily. The dark side did not hide anything and said truthfully. He also expressed the doubts in his heart. This was also one of the reasons why he could not see through Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng's magical power was very strange. For a moment, he could not figure it out. Especially the sky-swallowing technique, he was even more confused. Black hole sky-swallowing technique. Dizang of Goguryeo knew more than the dark side. When he heard the black hole, he immediately knew the whole story. Back then, in the 18 levels of hell, Tang Zheng's sky-swallowing technique merged with the King of Hell's Yama seal, which greatly increased the power of the sky-swallowing technique. Dizang of Goguryeo witnessed this scene with his own eyes. Of course, he was not unfamiliar with the sky-swallowing technique. However, he never thought that the sky-swallowing technique could completely absorb the water in the Sea of Bitterness. As for how much water there was in the Sea of Bitterness, even Dizang of Goguryeo did not know. Back then, he mediated the vengeful spirits and malicious ghosts in the 18 levels of hell. The 18 levels of hell were the closest place to the Earth's core. One time, by chance, he discovered that there was an ocean in the depths of the ghost realm. In the end, he named this ocean the Sea of Bitterness and blessed it with a supreme magical power. As he became more familiar with the Sea of Bitterness, he gradually understood the role of the Sea of Bitterness. In the end, he decided to take a gamble and use the Sea of Bitterness to solve the problem that had been troubling him. Everyone's personality had many sides. Whether it was an extremely evil person or a very kind person, they had to have a kind and dark side. These two sides coexisted, and it was impossible to only have one side. Dizang of Goguryeo was the same. His kind and dark side coexisted, and they were both very powerful. When he cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra, he gradually had an epiphany and made a great wish. If hell was not empty, he vowed not to become a Buddha. Obviously, his kind side had gained the upper hand, and his dark side was deliberately suppressed. However, as his skills became more profound, the dark side was also restless, and had the tendency to fight back and suppress the kind side. Dzong of Goguryeo knew what this meant. Once the dark side gained the upper hand, he would become an unpardonable murderer. The ghost realm would probably be plunged into misery and suffering in his hands. Why would he need to mediate the vengeful spirits and malicious ghosts? He himself was the biggest unstable factor. He had always wanted to drive the dark side out of his body, so that he would become perfect and only have the kind side left. Dzong of Goguryeo was really a harsh perfectionist. He did not allow a little bit of the dark side to remain. He had tried many methods, but they all ended in failure. When the sea of bitterness appeared, he saw the dawn of hope. Heaven did not disappoint those who worked hard. Through various experiments and with the help of the supreme magical power, he finally stripped the dark side out of his body and suppressed it at the bottom of the sea of bitterness. As long as the sea of bitterness was not destroyed and the seawater did not dry up, the dark side would be suppressed in the sea of bitterness forever. Dzong of Goguryeo could always only have the kind side, which could be called perfect. Big-breasted beauty Li Shueting's sexy see-through private photos, highly recommended. Please follow the official WeChat account to see the beauty online. Home of Beauty Search Mindgia 123 Press for 3 seconds to copy. Chapter 1377. Dzong of Goguryeo thought that his plan was flawless because with his strength, there was no way for him to dry up the sea of bitterness. He subconsciously thought that no one in the world of spirits and souls could do this. However, he never thought that Tang Zheng, an outsider, would actually succeed in shifting the sea by relying on the long-lost sky-swallowing technique. The Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's expression kept changing. It was extremely unsightly. He was so shocked that he couldn't say anything for a long time. In the end, he sighed and said, "Tang Zheng, you didn't turn back, but used the sky-swallowing technique to destroy the sea of bitterness. Do you know what this means?" When the dark side heard this, he said sarcastically, "You want me to be suppressed, but unfortunately, the heavens don't follow your wishes. I was suppressed by you back then, but now that I've returned, don't even think about suppressing me." Tang Zheng has already escaped. The next time I see him, I really have to thank him properly. The dark side changed the topic and said with a smile. Dzong of Goguryeo's eyes flashed with golden light and said, "Thank him? Humph, you have the nerve to say that? I'm afraid you want to kill him, right?" The dark side had seen how powerful Tang Zheng was. Although Tang Zheng had saved the dark side, he would not remember this kindness. Since he was the dark side, he had gathered all the insidiousness and cunning. How could he let go of such an unstable factor like Tang Zheng? The dark side did not care that Dzong of Goguryeo had seen through his thoughts. He laughed wildly, "Ha ha ha, I have to say, you know me best. However, at the same time, I know you best because we are one." "Who is one with you?" "You are willing to degrade yourself, so how can I be with you?" Dzong of Goguryeo said firmly. "You are still so self-righteous and proud. I will let you know now that you are very wrong." The dark side said sternly. He was ready to launch another fierce attack, but a voice was heard in a hurry. "You saw Tang Zheng in the sea of bitterness. Do you mean that he has escaped?" Li Xiaotian disregarded her own safety and soared into the air. She looked at the black fog face to face and asked. The black fog paused for a moment and seemed to be examining her. He asked curiously, "Who are you? How is Tang Zheng?" Li Xiaotian asked impatiently. The dark side was stunned and immediately understood. "Ha ha ha, you are that kid's lover, that's why you care about his safety. Since you are his lover, why are you staying by Ksitigarbha's side? Isn't this betraying that brat?" Li Xiaotian's expression, she said leisurely, "I didn't. TSK, interesting, really interesting. I almost forgot, that brat is a living person, and you are a ghost." Two people from two different worlds, separated by yin and yang, but became lovers. Hee hee, this ghost world is getting more and more interesting. Enough. Dizang of Goguryeo finally couldn't stand the dark side's one-man show and shouted. On the contrary, the dark side was even happier. The angrier Kitagarbha Bodhisattva was, the more he felt the thrill of revenge. He said proudly, I have held back for countless years and only managed to say a few words. How could it be enough? Little girl, do you want to know about your lover? Li Xiaotian nodded. Then sell your soul to me and let me order you around for eternity. I will naturally tell you. The dark side instigated. Sell her soul to him? Li Xiaotian was shocked. Her heart was deeply shocked. These words were too shocking. The other party actually wanted her soul and let her be a slave for eternity. In your dreams. Li Xiaotian scolded without hesitation. Li Xiaotian was a smart person. She naturally understood that this was a deal with the devil and would be beyond redemption. Although she was worried about Tang Zhang's safety, she also believed in his strength. Since he had escaped, he would definitely find her again. If she made a deal with the devil, when she saw him again, what face would she have left? How could she talk about staying together? Dizang of Goguryeo laughed. You think you can bewitch everyone in the world. This time it has finally failed. The dark side was stunned for a moment, as if he was examining Li Xiaotian. Suddenly, she felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. An extremely cold feeling enveloped her body. What a strange girl. Dizang of Goguryeo, don't boast too early. I have no way to bewitch him, but do you have a way to convert him? I think there is a world of difference between her and your other believers. The dark side retorted. His eyes were like torches. He could directly see the difference between Li Xiaotian and the others. Kitagarbha Bodhisattva's cheeks were flushed red. The dark side pointed directly at his pain. He had once thought that he could convert Li Xiaotian, especially during normal times. Imperceptibly influencing him was a very easy thing to do. But Li Xiaotian was like a stubborn rock. He was incomparably hard and pervasive. Dizang of Goguryeo was at his wit's end. Li Xiaotian's expression did not change. She asked, where is Tang Zhang now? The dark side proudly said, I told you before. If you want to know about him, you have to sell your soul to me. In your dreams. Li Xiaotian refused again without hesitation. Don't worry. Wait until I deal with the Dizang of Goguryeo, then we'll talk in detail. I'm too interested in that kid. The dark side simply gave up on Li Xiaotian and continued to target the Dizang of Goguryeo. Li Xiaotian was no match for the dark side. There was no way to force the other party to tell the truth. He had to give up. Boom! A black Sanskrit hit the Dizang of Goguryeo. The strong shock wave directly sent Li Xiaotian flying like a kite with a broken string. The two sides fought fiercely again. It was unknown who shouted, help the Dizang of Goguryeo. All the believers sat cross-legged in the ruins and chanted the Ksitagarbha Sutra. The golden light of the infinite Kasaya surged and quickly grew. In an instant, it covered the sky and enveloped the black fog. In the next second, the infinite Kasaya blocked all sight, enveloping the Dizang of Goguryeo and the dark side together. The believers kept chanting the Ksitagarbha Sutra, adding energy and power to the infinite Kasaya. Bang, bang, bang. It was as if something was constantly attacking the infinite Kasaya. Large bumps appeared on the infinite Kasaya, and these bumps grew more and more. The believers chanted the Ksitagarbha Sutra even faster. Unfortunately, they did not learn the true essence of the Ksitagarbha Sutra. This little help was like a drop in the bucket. The sound of the collision was like rumbling thunder, echoing in the sky above Fengdu City. It made Li Xiaotian's heart tremble, and his expression became solemn. She was very conflicted. The dark side was definitely not a good person. In comparison, the Dizang of Goguryeo was better. At least he would not kill the innocent. But if the dark side lost, how would she find Tang Zheng? She held her head in distress and fell into silence. Bang, bang, bang. When the sky above Fengdu City was completely drowned out by these collision sounds, the infinite Kasaya was covered with bumps. The believers' mouths were dry, and they seemed to have exhausted all their strength. They hung their heads dejectedly and could no longer chant the Ksitigarbha Sutra in its entirety. The golden light on the infinite Kasaya became dimmer and dimmer, like a lamp that was about to be extinguished. If the golden light disappeared, did that mean that the Dizang of Goguryeo had lost? Li Xiaotian couldn't help but clench his fists. The believers were in despair. They had already used all their skills, but the enemy was too strong. Suddenly, the collision sounds disappeared. Everything was silent, and this piece of land had sunk into a terrifying deathly silence. Everyone's breathing seemed to have stopped. They could only stare at the sky with their eyes wide open. Li Xiaotian's eyes gradually narrowed into slits, revealing a shocked expression. He pointed at the infinite Kasaya and exclaimed, "Look, the infinite Kasaya is turning black." Yes, the golden light had completely dimmed. The golden color on the infinite Kasaya was slowly fading away, eroded by the black color. The infinite Kasaya had turned black. What kind of scandal was that? No one didn't know what that meant. It meant that the dark side had gained the upper hand, and the east wind had overwhelmed the west wind. The good side of the Dizang of Goguryeo would be defeated, and from then on, the Dizang of Goguryeo would turn black. At that time, the world of spirits and souls would undergo earth-shaking changes, and the people would be plunged into misery and suffering. However, no one could stop all this, and it was really frustrating. Everyone's expression became more and more ugly, and their eyes were almost filled with despair. Because, they watched as more and more black color appeared on the infinite Kasaya, almost occupying the entire Kasaya. One side was golden, and the other was black. The golden light was dim, and the black light was like ink, constantly expanding. Li Xiaotian was very anxious. He leaped into the air and shouted, "Kill, help the Dizang of Goguryeo." He rushed toward the infinite Kasaya. Whoosh, 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 a few masters in the crowd who still had some strength flew up and attacked the infinite Kasaya. They all took out their magic weapons and attacked the infinite Kasaya. Whoosh! The black light broke away from the Kasaya and flew out. It was like a bolt of black lightning that appeared out of nowhere, hitting the enemies one after another. In a few screams, everyone fell down. In front of the dark side, these believers who were already at the end of their rope were no match for him at all. Li Xiaotian was no exception. When he fell to the ground, his body was almost falling apart, and his soul was scattered. However, he still stood up stubbornly. When he looked up again, the infinite Kasaya had completely turned black. Ha ha ha. An arrogant and hideous laughter came from the infinite Kasaya, and it was chilling. The believers were completely desperate. This laughter was obviously not the good side of the Dizang of Goguryeo, but the damned dark side. The infinite Kasaya had turned black. Did that mean that the Dizang of Goguryeo had also turned black? The Dizang of Goguryeo was the strongest person in the world of spirits and souls. Once he turned black, what would happen to the world of spirits and souls? Suffering and suffering? That was for sure. Perhaps, the situation would be worse. No one dared to continue thinking about it. The Kasaya became smaller little by little, but the black light became more and more intense. The ink-like infinite Kasaya seemed to be able to absorb all the light around it, making it difficult to escape. Suddenly, the black light flashed, and the figure of the Dizang of Goguryeo appeared. The infinite Kasaya was draped over his body, and the black light expanded. The appearance of the Dizang of Goguryeo did not change. It seemed that he was still the original Dizang of Goguryeo. However, when everyone looked at him, they felt that his temperament had undergone an earth-shattering change. There was no dazzling golden light on his body. Instead, a mysterious black fog rose and lingered around him. The black light in his eyes flashed, and he looked down at the people on the ground. He said loudly, "From now on, I am your new Dizang of Goguryeo. All the previous rules are abolished. I will lead you to a new world. Chapter 1378. Li Xiaotian felt that he had lost his mind and soul. It was as if he was about to be bewitched by the voice of the darkened Dizang of Goguryeo. The eyes of those with weak willpower had already changed. They couldn't help but kneel and kowtow to the Dizang of Goguryeo. When the Dizang of Goguryeo saw this, he laughed out loud. The hearts of the other followers were like dead ashes as they trembled with fear. The original Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had been defeated, so they were unwilling to submit to the current Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. However, they were not willing to become the slaves of the Dizang of Goguryeo. They turned around and fled toward the teleportation formation. Fengdu's city was almost destroyed, but the teleportation formation was supported by the divine ability and was not damaged. The only way to leave Fengdu's city was through the teleportation formation. Fengdu's city was surrounded by water and was surrounded by the Styx River that could not be crossed. Any attempt to fly away from Fengdu's city was suicide. They would fall into the Styx River and drown at the bottom of the river. Their souls would be scattered. The Styx River had a natural devouring effect on souls. The Dizang of Goguryeo revealed a mocking smile and said, "You want to escape just like that? Aren't you thinking too simply?" He grabbed at the void with his big hand. A few figures suddenly stopped and were in a deadlock in midair. They all revealed looks of despair. "Ah!" They screamed and stopped abruptly. Bang, bang, bang. They exploded and turned into wisps of yin qi that flew toward the Dizang of Goguryeo's palm. They rolled in his palm but could not escape his 5 fingers. "I told you to submit to me, but you want to escape. You can't blame me for this." The Dizang of Goguryeo muttered to himself. However, this sentence that seemed to be understated was filled with endless killing intent. Everyone stopped and did not dare to take half a step forward. Although the teleportation formation was not far away, they were not completely confident that they could escape the Dizang of Goguryeo's attack. They didn't want to follow in his footsteps. Li Xiaotian abruptly retracted the leg that she had taken a step forward. She looked at Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva in midair with fear. Dizang of Goguryeo gently landed on the ground. Those who submitted to him immediately lowered their heads into the dust and prostrated themselves on the ground, not daring to act rashly. Whoosh! Suddenly, a cold light flew out from the crowd and shot towards Dizang of Goguryeo. This was a Dharma treasure, and its power was not small. The Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was unmoved. He gently raised 2 fingers. Crack! His fingers gently clamped down on the oncoming magical weapon. Bang! With a loud explosion, the magic treasure turned into fine powder. Puff! Someone spat out a mouthful of blood. He was firmly bound by a force in the crowd and slowly flew up. No one dared to look, afraid that they would follow in his footsteps. That person kept struggling, but it was to no avail. His face was extremely pale, and with the last of his strength, he hysterically roared, "You are not the Dizang of Goguryeo. He will not kill the innocent. You devil, I will die with you." Dizang of Goguryeo laughed dryly and said, "Who said that I am not the Dizang of Goguryeo? I am one with him. You have only seen his hypocritical side before. This is his true side. It seems that you cannot accept it. Our Dizang of Goguryeo will come back. You will not be arrogant for long." The other person unwillingly retorted. Dizang of Goguryeo's eyes slightly narrowed, revealing a thin line, but a cold light suddenly appeared. He said in a deep voice, "He will come back. Humph, dream on. I will definitely not give him this chance." Hearing this, Li Xiaotian's heart moved. The other person's words revealed a lot of information. At least the Dizang of Goguryeo's good side did not disappear. It was just suppressed by him. This was the same as the Dizang of Goguryeo's good side suppressing the dark side. If the good side found an opportunity, it could naturally turn defeat into victory and take back control. This was a very slim hope. Li Xiaotian did not think that the dark side would be so careless and give him a chance to turn defeat into victory. You will never see that day, and I will not give you a chance to live. Go to hell. Dizang of Goguryeo suddenly roared, his large hand grabbing towards the void. Bang! With another explosion, the other person turned into wisps of yin qi, his soul scattered. The others were silent, no longer daring to resist. Many of them were believers of the good side of Ksitigarbha, but under the bewitchment of the dark side, their loyalty to the good side gradually collapsed. The Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva proudly walked through the middle of them. They automatically split into 2 rows and made way for him. Dizang of Goguryeo strolled in front of Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian stood in place, not moving. She knew that any resistance would be futile, so why should she resist? But she still stubbornly raised her head. The others lowered their heads, but she was different. Even if her soul scattered, she would raise her head and die with dignity. Dizang of Goguryeo stopped in front of her, sizing her up with interest. You really are very charming. No wonder that brat was so infatuated with you that he didn't hesitate to risk his life to revive you. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva said in amazement. He merged into Dizang of Goguryeo's body, and naturally, he also obtained the memories stored in his brain. He knew what kind of person Tang Zheng was, and had a close relationship with Dizang of Goguryeo. He also passed on the core of his own unique skill, the Ksitigarbha Sutra, to Tang Zheng. This was simply inconceivable. So, he wanted to see Tang Zheng even more. However, after Tang Zheng escaped from the sea of suffering, he still did not know where he was, so it was not easy for Dizang of Goguryeo to see him. But with Li Xiaotian, all of this was very easy. As long as Tang Zheng heard about Li Xiaotian's news, he could not wait to see him, and would not delay for even a minute. I won't resurrect him. I will let him leave the ghost realm and never come back. Li Xiaotian made up her mind. Dizang of Goguryeo laughed disapprovingly. Is that so? Then you are underestimating Tang Zheng's feelings for you too much. I dare say that for you, he is willing to do anything, even give up his life. Li Xiaotian's face suddenly changed. As the person involved, she had to admit that Dizang of Goguryeo's words were not false. In fact, Tang Zheng had always been a stubborn person. Once he made a decision or accepted it, even 9 bulls could not pull him back. He promised to resurrect Li Xiaotian, so he would try his best to do it. He would never give up halfway. Looking at Li Xiaotian's changing face, Dizang of Goguryeo said triumphantly, "It seems that I was right. He is really a sentimental person, admirable." However, it is often difficult for this kind of sentimental person to achieve great things, because they will be tied down by love. Nonsense, his achievements will definitely surpass yours. Li Xiaotian retorted. Surpass me? Ha ha ha, the world is so big, no one will surpass me in the future. Dizang of Goguryeo was full of confidence and said with a snort. Who said that he has to wait until the future? His current achievements have already surpassed yours. Li Xiaotian said earth-shattering. Dizang of Goguryeo was stunned for a moment, and then immediately laughed wildly, as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world. Already surpassed me? It seems that you are scared silly, to actually say this kind of nonsense. Dizang of Goguryeo shook his head, feeling very disappointed with Li Xiaotian. Li Xiaotian, however, insisted on his opinion and said, I am not speaking nonsense, it is 100% the truth. Do you know his achievements? He has saved the human world from destruction several times. He is the savior, not only now, but also in the future. He is the guardian of the human world. For your own selfish interests, you willfully killed the innocent. How can your so-called achievements be compared to his? Li Xiaotian's questioning was powerful, making people feel deep respect for him. Dizang of Goguryeo was suddenly stunned. These words made him speechless. This was the inside story that he did not understand. However, he immediately came back to his senses and said disdainfully, what is this? The savior of the human world, with this little ability, he is the savior of the human world. It seems that the human world is really decadent. That kind side is really pedantic, to actually let it be and let it be, letting the human world be promoted to a big world and the ghost world be demoted to a small world. This kind of thing that harms oneself to help others, only he can do it. Since I am one with him, then I will make up for this mistake. Dizang of Goguryeo talked non-stop. Obviously he did not agree with the original Dizang of Goguryeo's actions, especially regarding the small and big world, which made him furious, secretly cursing him for being pedantic and hopeless. You think that he has saved the human world from danger, this achievement is very great, right? Then I will destroy this greatness of his, I will destroy the human world, and let you all understand that he is not great at all, but a sinner of the human world. If it were not for him, I would not have made this decision. Dizang of Goguryeo added. What, you want to destroy the human world? Li Xiaotian turned pale with fright. Of course, he is a person of the human world, for the welfare of the human world, and I am the master of the ghost world, of course, I will also consider the development of the ghost world. I will correct the previous wrong path, and lead the ghost world on the right path. You are now a member of the ghost world, you should be happy and proud. Dizang of Goguryeo proudly raised his head, and said proudly. Li Xiaotian's face was ashen, and said, I will not be happy or proud, I will only be disgusted, your actions will definitely cause pain to both worlds, and intensify hatred, you are destroying both worlds, where is the slightest bit of greatness? That is because you have never seen yourself as a member of the ghost world, the ghost world will be grateful to me. Since you don't think of yourself as a member of the ghost world, then I will not be polite to you, come here. Dizang of Goguryeo stretched out his hand, and a terrifying force wrapped around Li Xiaotian. She exclaimed, rose into the air, and flew to Dizang of Goguryeo's side. Kitagarbha Bodhisattva looked at Li Xiaotian, who was right in front of him, and said with a smile, I will use you as bait to catch that brat. I know you are the best bait. Dream on, he will not be fooled. Li Xiaotian kept struggling and shouting, and hurriedly denied. But she knew in her heart that if Tang Zheng knew about her situation, he would definitely be fooled, and if he cared about her, Tang Zheng might not be as calm as usual, and would definitely be in danger. She wanted to send a message to Tang Zheng, telling him not to care about her, and return to the human world. The ghost world was no longer peaceful. But she did not have the chance. Dizang of Goguryeo laughed, and flew into the teleportation array. Now, I will let you see how I subdue the ghost world, unlike the original Dizang of Goguryeo who was helpless. Chapter 1379. Tang Zheng watched as the mountains shook and the sea of bitterness was annihilated. The light was so dazzling that he couldn't open his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the sea of bitterness was no longer in front of him. He was standing on a bare ground. He looked around and couldn't see the end of it. The dark sky was above his head, and a chilly wind blew. He suddenly stomped his foot on the ground and easily soared into the sky like a rocket taking off into the sky. He stopped in mid-air and looked down at the earth below. The earth seemed to have been hit by an earthquake as cracks appeared one after another. The scars that looked like centipedes were scattered all over the ground, making for an extremely ugly sight. However, flowers bloomed in his heart. He cheered excitedly and somersaulted in mid-air. Ha ha ha, I've finally escaped from the sea of bitterness and returned to the ghost realm. He was pleasantly surprised and took a deep breath. The cold aura in the air made his heart surge more than the power of the stars. His mind was immediately immersed in the heavenly realm, ready to express his condolences to the greatest contributor. In the heavenly realm, the Milky Way floated in mid-air. The water seemed to have no end as it flowed continuously from the waterfall to the earth. The river water gathered together to form a huge ocean. It was like a world of water. Everything was made of water. This scene full of vitality is really refreshing. No one would have thought that this river water is actually the water of the sea of bitterness. Tang Zheng was amazed and praised. His mind returned from the heavenly realm. He looked up at the sky and swore silently, Li Xiaotian, wait for me. I'm coming to save you. Where did the Dizang of Goguryeo lock her up? Fengdu City? Tang Zheng kept analyzing and finally confirmed that the possibility of Fengdu City was higher. After all, Fengdu City was the core of the ghost realm. Although Fengdu City was the territory of the King of Hell, the Dizang of Goguryeo would definitely choose this core city of the ghost realm to fulfill his ambitions. He didn't know that the 9 great kings of Hell had been dealt with by the Dizang of Goguryeo. Otherwise, he would be more worried about Li Xiaotian's safety. Whoosh! He landed on the ground, then revved up the engine and ran wildly. In the ghost realm, there was no way to cheer for the somersault cloud. If there was a battle soul sword, then one could only rely on one's legs. However, his legs were worlds apart from an ordinary person's. With a light step, he could cross several meters. They moved as fast as lightning, the great earth's shaking already stopped. Everything along the way was bleak, but they didn't encounter a single creature. After an unknown period of time, a towering mountain appeared in the distance. Its outline was clear, like a crouching beast. His pupils suddenly shrank as he felt that this mountain seemed to be somewhat familiar. He quickly approached. The mountain became more and more majestic, and he became insignificant, like an insignificant ant. However, his gaze was firmly attracted by something else. A large river surrounded the mountains. Styx! He cried out in alarm as he finally remembered where he was. Wasn't this the necropolis that he had been to before? However, he had never seen the outline of Fengdu Necropolis before because he had always used the transmission array to get there. I actually came to Fengdu Necropolis by chance. He was pleasantly surprised. The ghost realm was vast, and it was definitely lucky for him to find a city in such a short time. However, he immediately became worried. This was because he had to stop here. There was no way to cross the Styx and fly to Fengdu Necropolis. He deeply experienced the power of the Styx. If he hadn't relied on the protection of the 4 symbols venerable, he wouldn't have been able to escape from the Styx at all. Now that the 4 symbols venerable wasn't by his side, how could he cross this natural moat? He walked along the river bank for a while and found a stone, ready to throw it to ask for directions. Whoosh! The stone rubbed against the air, making a sharp sound as it flew above the Styx. Splash! However, as soon as the stone flew above the river, its forward momentum came to an abrupt halt as a huge force attracted it. In the next second, it rapidly fell into the river, splashing a few water droplets. Tang Zheng's head trembled. If such a light stone couldn't fly across the Styx, wouldn't he immediately fall to the bottom of the river if he went up? He rolled his eyes and looked up at Fengdu Necropolis, which was close at hand, but he couldn't go up. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a series of shocking sounds came from Fengdu Necropolis. It seemed to be the sound of fighting. He raised his sword-like eyebrows and muttered, "Is there a great battle in Fengdu Necropolis? Who in the ghost realm can be a match for the Dizang of Goguryeo? Could it be that the 10 kings of hell are making things difficult for the Dizang of Goguryeo?" He knew very well that the Dizang of Goguryeo would encounter obstacles when he carried out his ideas, especially the 10 kings of hell, who would definitely resist fiercely. Could it be that there was a conflict between the 2 sides? He couldn't wait to rush up and see what was going on. However, the Styx cut off his thoughts. He walked along the river bank and circled Fengdu Necropolis a few times, but he still couldn't think of a solution. Fengdu Necropolis had quietened down. Could it be that the battle had ended? Who won, who lost? Was Li Xiaotian injured in it? He was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, walking around in circles. Let's fight. Now that I've reached the 2nd stage of the Mahayana realm, I don't believe that I can't offset the attraction of the Styx River. Moreover, I'm not a stone. In the end, he had no other choice but to take a risk. He took a deep breath and urged his power. All the cells in his body became active, and his genuine qi seemed to be boiling. Whoosh! He kicked his legs and soared into the air, crossing the Styx River. However, when he flew above the river, a tremor from the depths of his soul trapped him. He screamed and quickly fell down. Although he was fully prepared, the power of the Styx River still exceeded his expectations. He was falling rapidly and was about to fall into the river. At that time, his soul would be swallowed by the water of the Styx River. "No, I can't die." He growled and pushed his palms forward. A huge force flew to the surface of the water, like a cannonball hitting the surface of the water, splashing up huge waves. However, the recoil force did not reduce the speed of his fall. *CK, I've seen a ghost. This Styx River is really evil. He still did not give up and hurriedly urged the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Golden Sanskrit words blurted out and wrapped around him, stopping him from falling. This Ksitigarbha Sutra has such a magical effect. He was dumbfounded, but he immediately came back to his senses. He suppressed his ecstatic mood and quickly flew to Phengdu Necropolis. Dzong of Goguryeo didn't tell me that the Ksitigarbha Sutra can restrain the attraction of the Styx River. I've been racking my brains for a long time. He complained secretly. Whoosh! He finally flew to the towering city walls of Phengdu Necropolis and found that the city was in a mess. It was almost destroyed, and a group of black figures knelt on the ground in fear and trepidation. They did not dare to act rashly. He searched for a while but did not find Li Xiaotian. He did not even find a familiar face. Where was King Yama? Wasn't this his city? Where was the Dzong of Goguryeo? The power of this battle was so great that even Phengdu Necropolis was almost destroyed. Who was fighting who? Where is the Dzong of Goguryeo? He did not care about hiding his figure and soared into the sky. With a bang, he landed in front of the people of the ghost realm. One by one, they raised their heads and looked at him in shock. Suddenly, someone recognized him and exclaimed, "It's him, the living person. He's the Tang Zheng that the Dzong of Goguryeo mentioned. Quickly go and report to the Dzong of Goguryeo that Tang Zheng is here." Someone cheered. When Tang Zheng heard this, he frowned. It seemed that the Dzong of Goguryeo was looking for him, but wasn't he trapped in the sea of bitterness? Why would he spend so much effort to find him? The Dzong of Goguryeo is looking for me? I don't need you to report, I'm going to find him. Tang Zheng said loudly, "Where is he?" Everyone's eyes were fixed on the teleportation array. Tang Zheng turned his head and immediately understood that the Dzong of Goguryeo had left through the teleportation array. Sigh, if I'm not a step late, I can find him directly without going through so much trouble. Tang Zheng sighed secretly and immediately asked the Dzong of Goguryeo's destination. This group of people did not know the destination of the Dzong of Goguryeo. They looked at each other and knew nothing. Tang Zheng glanced at them and knew that his question was unnecessary. He simply walked into the teleportation array. Suddenly, his heart moved and he asked, "Have you seen Li Xiaotian? She's a very beautiful girl. She looks like this." He tried his best to describe Li Xiaotian's appearance according to the impression he had in his mind. Their eyes lit up as they nodded and said, "She left with the Dzong of Goguryeo." Tang Zheng's eyes also lit up. Since Li Xiaotian had been captured by the Dzong of Goguryeo, her life was definitely not in danger for the time being. What happened here? Tang Zheng pointed at the messy Phengdu city and asked. They looked at each other and said, "The Dzong of Goguryeo had a big battle with himself, which led to all of this." Tang Zheng frowned. The Dzong of Goguryeo had a big battle with himself? These guys were scared silly, right? Even their words were not normal. Tang Zheng did not ask any more. Everything would be clear when he saw the Dzong of Goguryeo. He was already familiar with the teleportation array. The teleportation array in Phengdu City could send him to many places. He thought for a while and decided to go to Songjiangwang City first. In the world of spirits and souls, he was relatively familiar with him. It was better to ask him about the situation. Perhaps he would know the whereabouts of the Dzong of Goguryeo. Whoosh! A beam of light soared into the sky, illuminating the dark sky and enveloping Tang Zheng. His eyes suddenly lit up. The beam of light was so hot that he almost could not open his eyes. In the next second, the light disappeared, and he arrived at a new place. "Who's there?" A shout rang out, like a clap of thunder exploding in his ears. Whoosh! Whoosh! Tang Zheng cried out in alarm. Since when did the messengers of hell start attacking without distinguishing between right and wrong? Song Jianguang's ability to control his subordinates was too bad. In the blink of an eye, the storm-like attacks had already arrived in front of him. He was not afraid at all. With a wave of his hand, the enemies stopped in mid-air, and the approaching treasures exploded with a rumble. Whoosh! Whoosh! With a thought in his mind, a terrifying force pushed them back again. Their speed was even faster, and they slammed into all kinds of hard objects. Chapter 1380. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, the invading enemies all retreated. Tang Zheng finally saw clearly that this was indeed Song Jianguang city. He shouted, "Call Song Jianguang here, how dare you attack me?" So what if Song Jianguang is here? The Dizang of Goguryeo has already given the order that once we see you, we must capture you. The other party said sternly. Tang Zheng was stunned for a moment. The Dizang of Goguryeo had given such a fierce order to capture him. He had ulterior motives. Dizang of Goguryeo, where did our friendship go? You are so cruel, not only did you trap me, you even want to capture me. The other party prepared to swarm again, but a figure quickly flew over and shouted, "Stop!" Song Jianguang landed beside Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng looked at him angrily and said, "Song Jianguang, these are your subordinates." "Humph, they dare to attack me and even want to capture me." Song Jianguang smiled bitterly, but it was uglier than crying. He said awkwardly, "Calm down, today is different from the past." Tang Zheng's eyebrows trembled. Just as he was about to ask why, he heard an angry shout, "Song Jianguang, do you still dare to collude with him?" Tang Zheng opened his eyes wide in disbelief, wondering if he had heard wrongly. The other party's shrimp soldiers actually dared to shout at Song Jianguang. Wasn't this going against the heavens? Song Jianguang could only smile bitterly and quickly explained, "The ghost realm has changed, I will tell you in detail later." After pausing for a moment, he faced the others and said, "That's not right. Which eye of yours saw me colluding with him? Be careful, I will sue you for slander in front of the Dizang of Goguryeo." Didn't the Dizang of Goguryeo want to see him? If you all attack together and cause him to die, which one of you can bear the responsibility? The other party looked at each other and finally didn't dare to make a ruckus. He said embarrassedly, "Dizang of Goguryeo's order is to capture him. We are just following orders." Nonsense. Haven't you heard about the relationship between Dizang of Goguryeo and Tang Zheng? With their friendship, why would they capture Tang Zheng? The Dizang of Goguryeo only wants to see him. If you guys are mistaken, then you will be the ones to suffer. Song Jianguang's aura was very strong, causing the other party to be speechless. Song Jianguang struck while the iron was hot and said, "I will naturally bring him to see the Dizang of Goguryeo. You guys can leave now." The other party stared at Song Jianguang for a long time before reluctantly retreating. Tang Zheng's mind was in turmoil. Why had Song Jianguang's prestige and status dropped so much? Had the ghost realm really changed? Song Jianguang's situation could really be described with 6 words: miserable, 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 miserable. As if he saw the doubts in Tang Zheng's mind, Song Jianguang smiled bitterly and said, "I know you have a lot of questions. Listen to me slowly." Song Jianguang slowly narrated the recent happenings in the ghost realm, causing Tang Zheng's heart to tremble in fear as he continuously cried out in alarm. "You are the only one left among the 10 kings of hell?" "Yes. If I didn't act according to the circumstances, I'm afraid that I would have been killed by the Dizang of Goguryeo and ended up like the other kings of hell." Song Jianguang sighed. Tang Zheng was silent. He was really shocked by this news. The Dizang of Goguryeo actually changed his style and became so tough. He killed the 9 kings of hell while talking and laughing. In addition, he forcefully implemented his own ideas and tried to convert all living beings in the ghost realm. However, it caused a huge turmoil in the ghost realm. What about Li Xiaotian? After pondering for a while, Tang Zheng asked again. Song Jianguang sighed with emotion and said, "Your girlfriend's luck is really extraordinary." The Dizang of Goguryeo kept her by his side and wanted her to witness his conversion. He even passed on the Ksitigarbha Sutra to her and treated her as his right-hand woman. Even I can't compare to her. What, right-hand woman? Tang Zheng was shocked. Why did the Dizang of Goguryeo do this? The Dizang of Goguryeo wanted to prove that her and my suspicions were wrong and deliberately left us alive. It's just that your girlfriend was treated much better than me. Song Jianguang smiled bitterly. Suddenly, Song Jianguang changed the topic. He lowered his voice and said mysteriously, "However, I heard that something happened in Necropolis this time. Everything changed. Fengdu City has become a ruin. I just came from there." What, so serious? Song Jianguang was shocked. I only heard some rumors and didn't have time to verify it. Tang Zheng's curiosity was piqued and he asked, "What rumors?" The Dizang of Goguryeo seems to have changed. This change is extraordinary, but I don't know what exactly happened. Song Jianguang said. Tang Zheng's heart moved and he said, "Those people in Fengdu City are witnesses. If I knew earlier, would have asked them clearly." At that time, he was worried about Li Xiaotian's safety and didn't dare to delay. Otherwise, he would have asked clearly before leaving. The Dizang of Goguryeo has already passed down the order to capture you if you see you. He also told you that if you want Li Xiaotian to be safe and sound, you should obediently go see him. Song Jianguang said with a face full of suspicion, "This is very different from the Dizang of Goguryo's style in the past. I really don't understand." Tang Zheng's eyelids twitched. The Dizang of Goguryeo actually left such fierce words. It was definitely not on a whim, but because he had an ulterior motive. The Dizang of Goguryeo definitely knew that he had escaped the sea of bitterness, so he used this method to make him fall into the trap. Without the sea of bitterness, how can he deal with me? Kill me? Tang Zheng's heart trembled as he guessed. Are you going to see the Dizang of Goguryeo? Song Jianguang asked curiously. Of course I'm going. Tang Zheng said without hesitation. I'm afraid it's not good. You have to think twice. Song Jianguang advised. Tang Zheng said resolutely, Li Xiaotian is in his hands. No matter how difficult it is, I have to keep the appointment. He grasped my weakness. Very smart. I feel that the Dizang of Goguryeo is strange. You better think carefully. Song Jianguang was still very hesitant. Tang Zheng looked at him deeply and said, Don't you want to find out what happened to the Dizang of Goguryeo? The best way is to directly meet him. It's simple and direct. It's more effective than your wild guesses. Song Jianguang hurriedly waved his hand. No, I'm not going. Right now, he was avoiding the Dizang of Goguryeo like the plague. If he could avoid appearing in front of him, he would definitely stay away. He was deeply afraid that he would attract the Dizang of Goguryo's attention. Then, the Dizang of Goguryeo would deal with him like how he dealt with the other kings of hell. Song Jianguang still had the thought of resisting before, but now this thought was getting weaker and weaker. He almost couldn't see any hope. Looking at Song Jianguang's terrified expression, Tang Zheng frowned. How could Song Jianguang change so much in such a short time? He was completely different from the Song Jianguang of the 18 levels of hell. Could it be that the power of the environment was so great that it could change a person so much? Are you afraid? Tang Zheng asked directly. Song Jianguang stuttered and nodded. Yes, I'm really afraid. The world of spirits and souls is no longer the world of spirits and souls. The world has changed. How can I not be afraid? The Dizang of Goguryeo has countless followers. If he gives the order, his spittle can drown me. Tang Zheng stared at Song Jianguang with a burning gaze. After confirming that he was not acting, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Now, there was only one familiar Song Jianguang in the world of spirits and souls, and he had not been converted yet. Tang Zheng must definitely pull him along. Therefore, he grabbed Song Jianguang without any explanation. Song Jianguang tried to break free, and even urged his power, but found that there was no way to break free from Tang Zheng's hand. Immediately, he stared at Tang Zheng in shock and asked, Your power? Tang Zheng nodded and said, I'm already in the Mahayana realm. Song Jianguang's eyes lit up, and he said ecstatically, Wow, the Mahayana realm, you actually broke through to the Mahayana realm. I'm sorry, forgive me for losing my composure. This is really shocking news. So, you can fight with the Dizang of Goguryeo? Song Jianguang asked expectantly. Defeat the Dizang of Goguryeo and let him understand that his so-called plan to deliver all living beings from torment is impossible to achieve. Then, restore the world of spirits and souls to its former state. Tang Zheng said with a smile that was not a smile, You can't wait for me to deal with the Dizang of Goguryeo. Are you waiting to reap the benefits? After all, the other kings of hell are already dead, and you're the only king of hell left. Once the Dizang of Goguryeo loses power, the world of spirits and souls will be under your control. Song Jianguang's face stiffened, and he said awkwardly, Why would you think of me like that? How could I be that kind of person? Tang Zheng knew that Song Jianguang was resourceful and was the best at using tricks. Back then, it was his words that lured the Dizang of Goguryeo to swear that he would not become a Buddha until hell was empty. Thus, he forced the Dizang of Goguryeo to leave, allowing the world of spirits and souls to maintain its original state for countless years. Now, Song Jianguang was no match for the Dizang of Goguryeo, so he might have the intention to kill with a borrowed knife. Tang Zheng was meticulous, so how could he let go of such a big loophole? Tang Zheng, you've really misunderstood me. If you defeat the Dizang of Goguryeo and restore the world of spirits and souls to its original state, I'd rather worship you as the Lord. Song Jianguang patted his chest and said righteously, as if he really did not have any selfish motives. Tang Zheng laughed dryly and said, I'm not a member of the world of spirits and souls, so how can I become the Lord of the world of spirits and souls? Your words are equivalent to not saying anything. There's always a way to solve this. We should first solve the problem of the Dizang of Goguryeo. Song Jianguang said hesitantly. Tang Zheng did not pursue the matter and said directly, You must come with me to see the Dizang of Goguryeo. This is not up to you. You should know where he is. Song Jianguang understood that his arm could not win against Tang Zheng's thigh, so he could only compromise and nod helplessly. Song Jianguang activated the teleportation array, and the teleportation array lit up. The light rushed into the sky, and the few of them were bathed in the light. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared. In the next second, the light disappeared, and the two of them appeared in another city. Walala, there was a rush of footsteps, and the two of them were immediately surrounded by a dark mass of figures. Obviously, the Dizang of Goguryeo was well prepared. Once Tang Zheng appeared, he would not give him a chance to escape. Song Jianguang looked at the dark mass of figures, and his face was pale. He muttered, This is all your fault. You dragged me along and put yourself in danger. You have to protect me later. Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear to him and took a step forward, his aura surging like a rainbow. The other side unconsciously took a step back and loudly shouted, Stop. Chapter 1381. Tang Zheng and Song Jianguang were escorted by two groups of elite ghost generals who were eyeing them covetously as they walked towards a huge palace. Tang Zheng requested to see the Dizang of Goguryeo, and the group of ghost generals agreed. This was because they all knew that the Dizang of Goguryeo wanted to see Tang Zheng. Along the way, the two of them constantly sized up their surroundings and gradually discovered some changes. This city had an additional austere aura that caused people to tremble in fear. Song Jianguang felt it the most and muttered, Strange, this city is completely different from before. Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, What do you mean? I'm not unfamiliar with this city. I've been here before and it was peaceful back then. But now, this city is filled with austere aura and killing intent at every step. It's completely incompatible with the Dizang of Goguryu's requirements. Song Jiangwang said in a deep voice. The Dizang of Goguryo wanted to deliver all living beings from torment. That was because he wanted a peaceful environment and definitely not this kind of environment. On this point, Song Jiangwang had the right to speak. Tang Zheng said thoughtfully, "Didn't your information say that the Dizang of Goguryo underwent some changes in Fengdu City? Could it be this kind of change?" Song Jiangwang muttered to himself for a while and still shook his head. "I feel that this place is becoming more and more like the 18th layer of hell. Maybe it's just my imagination." Song Jiangwang shook his head, feeling somewhat confused. The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. Apart from the austere aura, this place was indeed filled with a vicious aura that was similar to the 18th layer of hell. But didn't the Dizang of Goguryo say that he wanted to deliver all living beings from torment? Why did this place become the 18th layer of hell? What exactly happened to the Dizang of Goguryo? Unknowingly, they arrived in front of a lofty palace. Just as they stepped into the palace, an overwhelming baleful aura swept over them. It was really like the 18 levels of hell. Tang Zheng and Song Jiangwang glanced at each other at the same time, their hearts raised. Song Jiangwang's face was uglier than if he were crying, as he continuously complained, "I already said that I wouldn't come, but you insisted on making me come. This time, my little life is going to end here." Tang Zheng snorted coldly and said, "The person Dizang of Goguryo wants to deal with is me, not you. What are you afraid of?" Song Jiangwang glanced at him resentfully and thought to himself, "I'm afraid of being implicated by you." However, he and Tang Zheng were in the same boat, so he didn't dare to offend Tang Zheng. When Song Jiangwang found out that Tang Zheng had reached the Mahayana realm, he placed all his hopes on Tang Zheng and naturally did not dare to offend him. Step by step, they went deeper into the palace. Whoosh! Streaks of dark blue flames rose from the palace and floated around the palace, completely illuminating everything. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank as he directly saw the figure of the Dizang of Goguryo. He was sitting on a huge chair, as if he had become one with it. The Dizang of Goguryo's eyes were like torches as he stared straight at Tang Zheng. It was like two bolts of lightning that directly landed on Tang Zheng's body. The invisible pressure made it hard for him to breathe. Tang Zheng stood proudly, staring at the Dizang of Goguryo with bright eyes. Song Jiangwang tilted his head to the side, as if he was afraid that the Dizang of Goguryo would discover his existence. "Huh, Tang Zheng, you're finally here." The Dizang of Goguryo's laughter sounded like a demonic sound that made one's heart sway. Tang Zheng and Song Jiangwang's expressions changed at the same time as they hurriedly circulated their energy and stabilized their minds. "Dizang of Goguryo, where's my girlfriend?" Tang Zheng asked directly. "Why are you in such a hurry? This is completely different from your calmness in the Sea of Bitterness." The Dizang of Goguryo said playfully. "Sea of Bitterness?" Tang Zheng's eyes flashed. "You watched my every move in the Sea of Bitterness?" "The word 'watched' is too serious. I saw your every move in the Sea of Bitterness." The Dizang of Goguryo corrected. "Then why didn't you stop me when you saw me destroy the Sea of Bitterness?" "I didn't meet your requirement to repent and be saved." Tang Zheng asked curiously. "Why should I stop you? I can't wait for you to destroy the Sea of Bitterness. Only then can I leave the Sea of Bitterness and return to this wonderful world." Ha ha ha. The Dizang of Goguryo opened his arms and laughed loudly. Tang Zheng and Song Jiangwang both frowned, their eyes filled with questions. This sentence had a serious ambiguity. The Dizang of Goguryo trapped Tang Zheng in the Sea of Bitterness. Why would he want him to destroy the Sea of Bitterness? The Dizang of Goguryo's laughter came to an abrupt end. He looked at them playfully and said, "I know you have a lot of questions. I will be merciful and answer them for you." After a pause, the Dizang of Goguryo said, "The one standing in front of you now is not the original Dizang of Goguryo, but another Dizang of Goguryo, the real Dizang of Goguryo." "The other real Dizang of Goguryo?" The two people's hearts trembled. They really could not understand what this meant. The original Dizang of Goguryeo is soft-hearted, overcautious, and extremely long-winded. He has a lot of ability, but he wants all living things to be equal. That's just wishful thinking. These words were earth-shattering and deeply shocked the two people's hearts. They were dumbstruck and could not help but wonder if they were hallucinating. How could these words come out of the Dizang of Goguryeo's mouth? All living things being equal was wishful thinking? That was the dream that the Dizang of Goguryeo had always been pursuing. How could he say that it was worthless? I have already declared that I am not the original Dizang of Goguryeo, so don't look at me like that. The Dizang of Goguryeo emphasized. Who the hell are you? Tang Zheng asked in a deep voice. I am still the Dizang of Goguryeo, just a more real Dizang of Goguryeo. The Dizang of Goguryeo said proudly, I am the essence of the Dizang of Goguryeo. The Dizang of Goguryeo looked deeply at Tang Zheng and said, Tang Zheng, I have to thank you. If it were not for you, I would not have been able to escape from the sea of bitterness and regain the initiative. Tang Zheng was aghast. He finally grasped the key point and asked, at that time, you were also in the sea of bitterness. I destroyed the sea of bitterness, so you escaped from the sea of bitterness? Smart, you finally understand the key point. Then why were you trapped in the sea of bitterness? Of course it was because of the original pedantic Dizang of Goguryeo. He thought that I was the dark side of his personality, so he suppressed me in the sea of bitterness, never to see the light of day. The Dizang of Goguryeo said hatefully. Tang Zheng seemed to have understood something and said, you are the dark side of the Dizang of Goguryeo's personality? I'm not. It's just a one-sided statement from that pedantic guy. I'm the true nature of Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva argued angrily. Tang Zheng and Song Jiangwang looked at each other and said in a low voice, the two opposite sides of the Dizang of Goguryeo's personality clashed, and one of them was suppressed in the sea of bitterness. Now that this personality has seen the light of day, it has controlled the Dizang of Goguryeo? Song Jiangwang nodded his head in shock, clearly agreeing with Tang Zheng's words. No wonder the Dizang of Goguryeo's temperament had changed so much. It turned out that the dark side of his personality had taken over. Then what about the original Dizang of Goguryeo? What did you do to him? Tang Zheng hurriedly asked. He and I were originally one, so of course I could not kill him. If he died, then my life would also be in danger. Therefore, I only suppressed him. The Dizang of Goguryeo said complacently. Where did you suppress him? The Dizang of Goguryeo pointed to his chest, of course here. The good side of the Dizang of Goguryeo was suppressed in his body. You want to release him, right? But have you thought about the situation after you release him? The world of spirits and souls will change greatly. You. The Dizang of Goguryeo pointed at Tang Zheng, then turned his finger and pointed at Song Jiangwang, and you don't agree with his way of delivering all living beings from torment. When the time comes, I'm afraid your end will be very ugly. Am I right? Song Jiangwang's face turned pale. Of course, he understood this point. During this period of time, he was trembling with fear, deeply afraid that he would follow in the footsteps of the other kings of hell. When the Dizang of Goguryeo was angered, it did not feel good. But I'm not that pedantic guy. I will give you power as long as you pledge allegiance to me. Tang Zheng, don't you want to resurrect Li Shaotian? I can satisfy you. The Dizang of Goguryeo threw out another huge bait. Tang Zheng's heart trembled, and his face changed slightly. Song Jiangwang was also moved, and his eyes kept changing, as if he was weighing the pros and cons. This is your only chance. I will rule the world of spirits and souls, and you too will assist me. In the future, you will be under one person and above thousands, enjoying supreme power and glory. The Dizang of Goguryeo's voice was very bewitching. Song Jiangwang's throat moved, as if he was swallowing. Tang Zheng was also a little moved. In the world of spirits and souls, only the Dizang of Goguryeo knew how to capture Li Shaotian. In the past, the Dizang of Goguryeo would not relent no matter what. Now that there was a glimmer of hope, should he give it a try? Although this was the dark side of the Dizang of Goguryeo, what did it have to do with him? After all, this was the world of spirits and souls, not the human world. He had no responsibility. His heart swayed, and he seemed to be about to blurt out a promise. The Dizang of Goguryeo looked at the two of them confidently, and urged, "If you miss this chance, it will be too late for regrets. Don't blame me for not giving you a chance." Song Jianguang was moved, and asked hesitantly, "What do you plan to do with the world of spirits and souls?" The Dizang of Goguryeo looked at Song Jianguang approvingly, and said, "The world of spirits and souls can only have one master. Of course, that can only be me. I want to end this situation of disunity. The world of spirits and souls is united, and there is a lot to be done. I think the world of spirits and souls has been downgraded to a small world." Humph, what nonsense. A small world. When Tang Zheng heard these 3 words, it was like a wake-up call, and he immediately sobered up. He stared at the Dizang of Goguryeo, and said, "The world of spirits and souls has become a small world. What do you want to do?" The Dizang of Goguryeo's eyes flashed. "Of course, it will be promoted to a large world again." Tang Zheng's heart trembled, and he immediately had an answer. Song Jianguang also had an answer, and a smile appeared on his face. He lightly floated in front of the Dizang of Goguryeo, and said, "Dizang of Goguryeo is wise. The small world is in danger of being destroyed at any time, and this is like a sword hanging over everyone's head." The original Dizang of Goguryeo was indeed foolish, and actually took the initiative to downgrade the world of spirits and souls. Us 10 kings of hell did not agree to this, and he was the one who insisted. Obviously, Song Jianguang had already pledged allegiance to the Dizang of Goguryeo. A cold light flashed in Tang Zheng's eyes. Song Jianguang really could not be trusted, and his ability to take advantage of the situation was top-notch. He was still delusional to think that he would help him. What wishful thinking. The Dizang of Goguryeo nodded in satisfaction. "You are a smart guy. No wonder the other kings of hell all died, and only you survived." Song Jianguang smiled bitterly. "You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.